And really, even in his first term, it's all about education and funding public education. A few statistics for you. With the previous administration, this is according to the U.S. News and World Report, Wisconsin ranked 18th in the education system and now is ranked 8th best in the nation. So what is Governor Evers going to do moving forward to strengthen public education? He says it's all about keeping class sizes small, improving reading and literacy outcomes, and expanding mental health services in schools. So these supporters are going to be coming in here any minute. But for now, in downtown Madison, Elizabeth Wattis, NBC 15 News.
Elizabeth, thanks. And with Evers' challenger, NBC 15's Michelle Beck. She's following the developments in Milwaukee with the Tim Michels campaign and his supporters. Michelle?
Hi, John and Maria. Again, this is the Italian Community Center. But for the first time this evening, we are seeing supporters in the crowd behind me. And just within the last 15 minutes, even, we've seen the energy really ramp up here. It's been amazing. We've seen lots of people in red, lots of supporters coming out to show, obviously, who they are here for. They want to see the kind of decision, the vote that they cast on their ballots today. But as Elizabeth was mentioning, for Tim Michels here, one of the top issues here was really money, the fact that he comes from a business background. Inflation and fighting inflation, that was really important for him throughout this entire campaign trail. And of course, we know from the most recent Marquette Law School poll, inflation does rank as the #1 concern among registered voters. So that is what we know, and that is what Mr. Michels has really acknowledged throughout the campaign trail. On top of fighting inflation, we know that Mr. Michels has also said he wanted to do the so-called massive tax reform. And for him, if you look on his website, that comes down to eliminating the personal property tax, also reducing the corporate and individual income taxes. So that is just one thing, money, on his platform. We'll discover more in the minutes to come. In Milwaukee, I'm Michelle Beck.
All right, Michelle, thank you. We are also keeping a very close watch on the race for Wisconsin's U.S. Senate seat. It's a very busy night for our news team as we're tracking more than 200 total races.
And we'll be right back here on NBC 15 at 8:26 with another election update. But right now, we are just seconds away from beginning our special election night edition of NBC 15 News. We'll have continuous team coverage, including more live reports from across the state and experts to break it all down right here in our studio.
We invite you to join us from wherever you are and from wherever you stream. It's election night. We've got your coverage on NBC 15 News.
The midterm battle in our battleground state. The polls are now closed. Wisconsin and the nation now wait to see who emerges victorious, challenger or incumbent. Our NBC 15 News team is standing by around the state to bring you results and reaction. A special election night edition of NBC 15 News. The battle in the battleground starts now.
It is an important and a very big night in the Badger State as the governor's office and a U.S. Senate seat hang in the balance. We have team coverage from Madison, Milwaukee, the Fox Valley, following all of these campaigns.
So thank you for joining us tonight from wherever you are streaming for this special election night edition of NBC 15 News.
And our Lee Mills is also here with the Unspun team, providing analysis and the perspective behind the numbers we're going to eventually start seeing come in here tonight. And in our newsroom, our results team's tracking more than 200 total races. Now, the polls just closed a couple of minutes ago, and as we've been mentioning, mentioned to you, if you were in line, if you know someone in line at that time, you still will be allowed to vote. Those poll workers will come out and denote who was in line at the time. So do be patient. Our reporting team has new information to share from the campaign headquarters.
Let's begin with the governor's race and the man challenging Governor Tony Evers. NBC 15's Michelle Beck joins us live from Milwaukee.
Yeah, John and Maria, like you mentioned, the polls did close, but it looks like doors opened minutes before that. Already we have heard music. You behind me, you can see, lots of supporters, mostly in red, to show, which party, which candidate they are here for. And to mention, I noticed that this venue is actually about maybe 3 times the size of the venue from primary night. So I believe lots more people are expected to show up here tonight, as well as Tim Michaels, more supporters and members of his family. But let's hone in on just one thing: money. That has been a crucial part of the Michaels campaign here, even stemming from the fact that Mr. Michaels is a businessman. Now, one of the first and foremost things has been fighting inflation. And another thing is Mr. Michaels tells people that they are all overtaxed. He mentions the nearly $6 billion in the budget surplus that Wisconsin has, and points to those numbers, telling people that they are overtaxed by that amount. We have heard him say that in things like in towns like Theresa. And so money, inflation, that is just one of the top priorities for Mr. Michaels here on this campaign trail. Lots more ahead that we will explore. In Milwaukee, I'm Michelle Beck.
All right, Michelle Beck with the Michaels campaign in Milwaukee.
So now let's get to the very latest from NBC 15's Elizabeth Wattis. She is live with the Evers campaign in Madison. Elizabeth.
John and Maria, I'm about a block and a half away from the Capitol here at the Orpheum Theater. No supporters here just yet, but the music just turned on about 1 minute ago. You see that monitor is also on. This campaign is getting ready to welcome supporters as the polls just closed to come and hopefully celebrate tonight as those votes start rolling in. Now, one of the main issues that Governor Tony Evers, the former state superintendent, is running on is education. He wants more funding for our public schools. He says the key is to keep class sizes small and also invest in more mental health resources for students and special education. Also, he talks a lot about his tax cuts, touting that he cut taxes for most Wisconsinites by 15% in his first term. He wants to additionally cut 10% more for Wisconsinites who make less than $100,000 a year. So a lot of different issues that he has been touting. Also roads, infrastructure, fixing that. But now the voting is done, and it's starting to feel more like a party in here. We just need the supporters and the people to start filling the theater. And this is where I will be all night following this neck and neck campaign for Wisconsin governor. For now, reporting live in Madison, I'm Elizabeth Wattis.
Well, nationwide, we are closely following which party will take control of the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House. So one of the Senate seats up for grabs is right here in Wisconsin.
And tonight we are with both the Ron Johnson campaign and his challengers. So that's where we'll find NBC 15's Tyler Peters. He's with the Mandela Barnes campaign, and he's been there since early this afternoon.
Supporters have just begun starting to file in here at the Turner Hall Ballroom. The party is just starting. Mandela Barnes himself has not been seen yet in the room, but he has spent much of the day with supporters. He was also at UW Milwaukee today speaking to students, trying to encourage that young base to go out and vote. I've spoken with their campaign team. They tell me that they feel really good about the support they've had so far, and they think that this race is going to come down to voter turnout. I also talked to a Democratic strategist who tells me that Dane County turnout is going to project it to surpass what they saw in the 2020 presidential election. So that is good news for the Barnes campaign here this evening. Now, a couple of the issues that he did run on was abortion rights, cutting taxes for the middle class, and crime as well. Reporting live in Milwaukee, I'm Tyler Peters, NBC 15 News.
All right, Tyler, thanks. Let's head farther north to Neenah in the Fox Valley. That's where we find incumbent Ron Johnson tonight. He is seeking his third term in the U.S. Senate.
And our NBC 15's Colton Molesky is with the Johnson campaign and has new details to share.
Senator Ron Johnson just made his way around the room for the first time tonight about 20-30 minutes ago. You can see him over my shoulder. He's shaking hands with folks, talking with supporters as this room in his election headquarters has really filled up over the last couple of hours. I've been able to talk with a few of his supporters. There's a lot of confidence in this room as it fills. I've also been talking with the Johnson campaign. They believe they put together a very strong campaign and finished really strong with a 60-stop bus tour across the state. Now, they also told me that they've been in contact with folks across the state, and some say that they have more people than usual showing up at a polling place. Others say they have less people than prior years showing up at a polling place. They say they really can't get a handle on what to expect. They're just going to have to wait until the results start rolling in. Live in Neenah, Colton Molesky, NBC 15 News.
And when those results do come in, our political analyst will be with us tonight to help break down what these numbers mean.
And Lee Mills joining us now with a special edition of Unspun.
I want to introduce our analysts for tonight. They are going to be with us for the long haul. Bill McCoshen, partner at Michael Best Strategies, and Mike Brown, Deputy Director of A Better Wisconsin Together, although you did predict 9 p.m., and so we're going to hold you to that in about 52 minutes.
I may want to shuffle that back to 10.
Thinking a little bit later? Okay. So let's talk about these two statewide races. We just heard our reporters at those 4 important locations. Let's start with the governor's race. We know the latest poll was neck and neck. We talked 5 days ago. What have you seen transpire kind of in the home stretch of this campaign? What is your prediction for what we see tonight and when?
I think that race is going to go a little bit later, and it ultimately will be closer than the Senate race, I'm guessing. All the polls in the final 5 days showed Tim Michels leading, most by 1. The final one by Trafalgar had him up by 2. For an incumbent, generally what you see on the polling is what you get. That puts Tony Evers around 48.5%. It really could come down to Joan Beglinger and how many she gets as the third-party candidate.
Which would take away from Michels, presumably.
Yeah, more than likely. And she's endorsed Michels, and they put out a release and a statement from her reminding voters that she has endorsed Michels. But, you know, for us on the Republican side, we're watching what Democrats do. Turnout is spectacular so far in Dane and Milwaukee County. According to your last report, it might be up by 50,000 votes from the presidential turnout in Dane County. So that's historic, and hopefully we can overcome that, and we'll talk about that later.
What do you think about the governor's race, Mike?
Well, first of all, just a big thank you to all of the poll workers who are out there counting these votes and will be for a while tonight. I think the turnout in Dane and Milwaukee County has to be encouraging for the governor. You know, Dane, those are really 2 critical counties where a Democrat in a statewide election needs to run up the margins. And with that kind of turnout, that definitely portends well for them.
What about the U.S. Senate race? So we see a 2-point split in the most recent Marquette poll. What have you seen transpire over the last few days in that race and your prediction?
I thought Ron Johnson had one of the best closing ads I've ever heard. His radio ad was spectacular. It sort of walked through what the choice was all about for voters. It contrasted with Mandela Barnes. I think Johnson ran an incredible general election campaign. Not only do I think he'll win tonight, but he should win potentially by his largest margin ever.
I think, again, we saw a very close race. I think you saw the Barnes campaign closing strong. And I think you see, again, these turnout numbers. You know, it is critically important who turns out, not just the total turnout numbers.
Right.
And when you see places like Dane County and Milwaukee County turning out strong, that's good news for Democrats.
Do you have any sense on, and it seems like the independents continue to shrink and we just continue to become more polarized, but there's an important pool there, and do you have any read on how that group is going?
Well, if you look at the exit polls across the country, the #1 issue is the inflation, followed by the economy, and those sort of are in the same basket. Marquette's poll last week for independents, the top 3 issues were inflation, public schools, and crime. That should work well for Republican candidates, both Tim Michels and Ron Johnson tonight.
I think certainly you see that, you know, traditionally that would have been a great headwind for Democrats, but they have been running strong this entire campaign cycle. So it isn't impacting us here like it maybe is in some other states.
Do you have anything to say about the youth vote? Because today there was some scuttlebutt about that 18 to 24 group coming out in huge numbers.
I think what we saw, some of the early reports were that the youth vote was up significantly across the state of Wisconsin. Strong turnout on campuses. Those voters, I think, when you look at the issues that they care about and who represents them, are very likely Democratic voters.
We're going to see. You know, typically youth don't turn out in midterms. You predicted this last week when we were together, and it certainly was true on Madison's campus today. We'll see if it's true across the state.
Bill, Mike, we appreciate it. You're going to be with us. We've got a lot more to cover. We're going to talk about the local statewide state house races, and we're going to walk you through some of the counties we will specifically be keeping our eye on. So stay with us.
Throughout the day, we've been monitoring what's been happening at the polls. It's been busy at a number of locations, as they were alluding to there. You may have waited in line yourself. And NBC 15's Marcus Arsvold has an update from the town of Middleton and Fitchburg.
Some town of Middleton voters have been out here for more than an hour, and a lot of them say it's worth the long wait to make their voices known. The town of Middleton line extended all the way across the polling place parking lot. Law enforcement stood by inside to make sure people were behaving. Voters say it's exciting to see a high turnout like this.
The lines have never been this long, but I think it shows that people really care for them to brave the cold and be out here. So I think it's good.
Fitchburg voting lines are also very long. The clerk's office called the fire department to help manage exits and ensure people could exercise their rights. Chief Joe Pulvermacher's never seen such a turnout.
I mean, there's been a lot of attention with this election, and with that, I mean, that regardless of party or affiliation, people are expressly interested in making sure that their vote is registered, and it's been very popular.
City of Fitchburg and town of Middleton leaders all say that they maybe didn't expect this number of people to line up to vote, but they're glad that they're here and willing to brave the cold. In town of Middleton, Marcus Arsvold, NBC 15 News.
For Dane County Sheriff, incumbent Calvin Barrett is taking on one of his current employees, Anthony Hamilton. NBC 15's Cameron Kelly joins us now with an update on this race.
Maria, I have been in contact with both candidates. Things to know about incumbent Calvin Barrett. If re-elected, he says he will continue to work on lowering the jail population. Barrett says he would like to provide tools to help people from returning back into the system. Candidate Anthony Hamilton says if elected, he would like to focus on reforming flawed practices. Hamilton says he wants to do things that are being transparent with the community. He says traditional policing strategies are not totally flawed, but in some circumstances, they create tension in communities. Right now, we know Calvin Barrett is with incumbent Governor Tony Evers tonight, and his opponent, Anthony Hamilton, is spending time with his family and friends. Live in the newsroom, Cameron Kelly, NBC 15 News.
Well, the position of Iowa County Sheriff opened up in this election with the retirement of Steve Mitchek, the longtime sheriff there in that county, and they will be a new face in that role for the first time in well over a decade. Kim Allen and Michael Peterson are on the ballot there. We don't have numbers yet, but let me tell you about them. Allen has 16 years of experience in law enforcement. The past 11 served in the Madison Police Department. Peterson holds 18 years of working for the Iowa County Corrections and Emergency Dispatch. Well, there's a live look now at our state capitol on this election night. Clear skies and a little bit warmer than we might expect this time of year.
But a cool down is on the way. Meteorologist Brian Dukes tells us what to expect in your first alert weather forecast. It's a busy night for all of us in the newsroom tonight, but thankfully not super busy for you.
Yeah, fortunately, we're not dealing with anything like we had over the weekend and what we will have later in the week. So Mother Nature kind of cooperating with Election Day, and average highs on Election Day, typically the upper 40s. We made it into the mid 50s, so 5-10 degrees above normal. And the warm up, it doesn't stop there. We'll be into the low 60s tomorrow, low 70s on Thursday. I do think that will be a record high temperature. That record currently stands at 67. 71 would, of course, be much, much higher than that. It's all ahead of a big, strong fall storm system that's going to be rolling in Thursday evening. There are still some questions, but it will be a line of showers and storms. The questions kind of lie with how strong these are going to be and where that severe potential is going to set up. Here's your first alert that there will be severe weather back through southern Minnesota, central Iowa, down into Missouri. We're kind of on the eastern flank of this, if you'll call it that, and that is a level 1 risk of severe weather Madison westward. It'd be an isolated, stronger severe storm. If this starts to look a little more likely, we may need to start thinking about a first alert day. We'll see what Chief Meteorologist Charlie Shortino has on that as we head into tomorrow morning. 44 right now in Madison. Winds kind of kicking up out of the south and east at 10 miles an hour. Just a couple clouds tonight. I think the rain widely misses us off to the north as we head into tomorrow morning. More clouds. There is a spotty shower chance tomorrow. I think most places are dry. dry tomorrow night. And while there could be a spotty shower early Thursday, the main event is not expected to roll through until Thursday evening and Thursday night. So here we go through 5, 6 o'clock. There's that line. It'll be a quick hitter. That's the line that may bring some gustier winds and will bring at least that small chance of a strong or severe storm. It's out of here on Friday, and the cold air will be rushing in. Overnight tonight, temperatures climbing through the 40s. We'll be near 50 by daybreak. 63 tomorrow, mostly cloudy, spotty shower. 71 record highs on Thursday to a high of just 38 on Friday. That's not a typo. That is a dramatic drop, and we'll hang out into the 30s through the weekend and next week. Flurries and snow showers, best chance will come next Tuesday.
All right, let's check in on some numbers. We actually have some early numbers in here in the governor's race. In these numbers here, as you see, very few really in the scheme of things. But Tim Michaels, the challenger, with an early lead here, 3,222 to Tony Evers, the incumbent, 2,911. But that is a small percentage of the votes that will be tallied before the end of the night, maybe into tomorrow. But those are the first numbers of the night in one of the biggest of the two races we are watching here, along with all the others. And we'll continue to keep an eye on those, and you can continue to see them on the bottom of your screen or at NBC15.com. And remember, the Attorney General race is another big race here, and some early numbers there. As you can see by those numbers, that's just a very small number of votes that have already been tabulated. And again, the challenger, Eric Toney, the Fond du Lac District Attorney for the past decade, is ahead of Josh Call, 51% to 49%, very early in the tally there. Let's go to Secretary of State. Something that's very interesting. Doug LaFollette, almost 40 years in that position, distant descendant of fighting Bob LaFollette. He is wanting to hold on to that seat. The Republicans would like to see him out of that and have Amy Loudenbeck in there so that they could potentially move control of certifying elections back into that office should they win. We don't have numbers yet there, but we will continue to watch that. Let's look at State Treasurer, another race we'll be following tonight. Again, no numbers just yet. Aaron Richardson, the Fitchburg mayor there, John Leiber, a lawyer in the Madison area, and the Constitution Party Representative Andrew Zilke. No numbers yet. We'll follow that. Second congressional district, including the city of Madison, surrounding areas in south central Wisconsin. The incumbent Mark Pocan. Some numbers in here. He's off to a lead, as would be expected, in very blue Dane County over challenger Eric Olson. Olson indicating that one of his platforms was term limits, and he put in his literature he's never held public office, and that is a selling point in his eyes. And certainly Mark Pocan has been in public office for a long time, and right now he has a lead with the estimated percentage in of just 1%.
Now, our election night team is closely watching a number of those U.S. congressional races. At stake, the balance of power in the House. Democrats currently have the majority, and they want to keep it. One of those up-for-grabs seats is currently held by La Crosse native Ron Kind. The Democratic congressman is retiring after 26 years in office. He's the longest-serving Democrat in Wisconsin's delegation. Kind is known for his bipartisanship and served on several committees, including the Ways and Means Committee, where he advocated for tax benefits for farmers. And he's also known for being a leader on environmental projects and protections, including preservation of the Mississippi River. The two men vying for Kind's seat are Democratic State Senator Brad Pfaff and Republican retired Navy SEAL Derek Van Orden. Now, the 3rd congressional district is following the Mississippi River from Cuba City in the south to River Falls up in the north. The race is just one our election night team is keeping a close eye on.
In fact, Maria, that is the one that I think has the biggest stakes because we expect the incumbents to win in all 7 other congressional districts here. So talk about the implication, knowing as I look here at House results that Republicans need 38 more seats for control.
I think they already have control based on what happened in Virginia and Florida. They picked up seats they weren't expected to pick up in Florida. unless there's a catastrophe west of the Mississippi, which I don't think there will be tonight, Republicans probably already have control of the Congress.
Do you expect this seat to flip for the first time in decades?
Yeah, there's no question. Steve Gunderson was the last Republican to hold this seat. We do expect Eric Van Orden to win tonight, probably handily. He barely lost to Ron Kind 2 years ago. This is a seat that Donald Trump has won twice. Michaels and Johnson are both polling well there, so that's going to help down ticket, and we'll talk about that later tonight. But yeah, we expect the Van Orden victory tonight.
And how about you, Mike? What's your read on this race?
Well, you know, Derek Van Orden's been running for that seat for several years now, and
sometimes that's what it takes.
and certainly, you know, some of the area covered by that district has been trending away from Democrats. You know, I think there are some key areas that Brad Pfaff's campaign would be hoping to turn out, like campuses in Stevens Point, Eau Claire, and La Crosse. And we'll have to see how that one turns out after all the votes are counted.
The problem for Pfaff is the National Democrats pulled out a long time ago, so he was not well funded. Yeah.
And what about this idea about Democrats kind of losing a relationship with rural Wisconsin? Do you see that as an issue in this race?
I mean, I think Brad Pfaff grew up on a farm and has a very close connection to agriculture. He worked for Congressman Kind for a number of years and specialized in agricultural policy. You know, he knows farms. He knows farm voters in that district. We'll see how he's able to overcome what is probably a little bit of a financial disadvantage in that race.
Yeah, I think the rural areas have been slipping away from Democrats for some time, and you'll definitely see that in the legislative races tonight later.
Okay, we're going to keep an eye on that, and we will talk about some of the state house races coming up, so stick around.
Well, another race we're watching very closely, and now with 3% of the estimated vote in, the incumbent is trailing the challenger right now by a significant margin. But again, this is only 3% of the estimated vote total in. Mandela Barnes with 59%, Ron Johnson with 41%. And Johnson, of course, seeking his third term in the U.S. Senate.
That's right. NBC 15's Colton Molesky is with the Johnson campaign now in Neenah.
As you can see, the election headquarters here for Senator Ron Johnson, very full. People have been streaming in over the last couple of hours. Ron Johnson is back by that podium. The senator's talking with people, shaking hands, and there's a lot of confidence in this room. I've been talking with a lot of his supporters, a lot of these folks very confident that people are going to turn out and vote for Senator Johnson and elect him to a third term as U.S. Senator. A lot of people very excited to be here, very excited to see this election party celebrate later on. So a lot of confidence, not really a lot of nerves really in this room, a lot of confidence from the supporters. As far as from the campaign, when I was talking with them earlier today, they are very happy with how the campaign finished in the closing days before today and how Ron Johnson closed out the campaign across the state of Wisconsin. They say as far as the turnout at different polls, time will tell as the election results start rolling in. In Neenah, Colton Molesky, NBC 15 News.
Hey, Colton, thank you. NBC 15's Tyler Peters now joining us at the Mandela Barnes campaign this evening in Milwaukee.
All right. Obviously, we don't have Tyler's microphone there. We'll work on that and check back with him in a bit. But again, the numbers are starting to come in a little bit earlier than maybe we expected. Yeah. Keep in mind when you see those numbers and they're in the hundreds and low thousands, those are just maybe a community or a couple of precincts here and there. And there will be a lot more to come. And some of them won't come until very late. It'll be interesting to see. And we'll continue to watch. And we hope you continue to watch with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching with us tonight. Stream wherever you can, wherever you are. We're going to pause and take a quick moment to break and update those who are watching us on TV. We'll keep streaming, though, this special election edition of NBC 15 News on all of your favorite devices. A reminder of all the places you can find us. Thank you for joining us for this very special election night edition of NBC 15 News. Good evening. I'm Maria Lizignoli.
And I'm John Stofflet. That possible power shift is why the nation is closely watching races all around the country, and right here, the U.S. Senate race in Wisconsin. The polls, of course, closing at the top of the hour. Here's a first look with 4% of the estimated vote in. The challenger, Mandela Barnes, off to an early lead there. Keep in mind, those are low vote totals right now, so a lot more to come in. But right now, Mandela Barnes was 75,000 votes. Ron Johnson, 53,000 votes. So our results team's also tracking more than 200 total races. You'll see them scrolling at the bottom of your screen.
And we have team coverage at both campaigns, along with every step of the way.
That's right. Let's start with NBC 15's Colt Molesky. He's up in the Fox Valley in Neenah at Senator Johnson's campaign.
It's a festive atmosphere here at the election headquarters for Senator Ron Johnson. Lots of people cheering. They have TVs up behind me where they're showing election results. Lots of people cheering as they see various races come to a conclusion across the country. Senator Ron Johnson just about 40 minutes ago started making his way around the room, shaking hands and greeting people. Now they're all just waiting for the results to roll in. The campaign for Senator Johnson, very confident with how they finished that race and like how they came into Election Day. Now they say that they're getting some responses from across the state about some polling places seeing more people than they've seen in prior years, some places seeing fewer people than they've seen in prior years. So they're telling me that really it's a waiting game. It's not really solid numbers to go off of for them as far as what to expect throughout the night. They're just going to have to wait for those election results to roll in, just like the rest of us. And we'll have the results and what's happening here throughout the rest of the evening. In Neenah, Colt Molesky, NBC 15 News.
And NBC 15's Tyler Peters has been in Milwaukee most of the day with the Barnes campaign. Tyler, what's the energy feeling like there now?
Yeah, the energy is definitely starting to pick up as the night goes on. More and more supporters have begun to file in here at the Turner Hall Ballroom. We still have not seen Mandela Barnes himself. They actually just showed those early results on the video board behind me moments ago, showing Barnes with that lead. There was a bit of an applause there. So the energy, a lot of these supporters feel good. I just spoke with one of these supporters moments ago who tells me one of the reasons why they're voting for Barnes is because she believes they need a different leader to help the city of Milwaukee, and I found that particularly interesting because that's one of the things Mandela Barnes has been attacked for is when it comes to funding the police. There have been attacks of him defunding the police, but he has not said those exact words. Instead, he has mentioned that he would support federal funding for the police officer shortage here in Wisconsin. So that's one of the things that I found very interesting from what she had to say. Barnes, also a native of Milwaukee, grew up here. Both mom and dad had union jobs. Mom worked as a teacher, dad worked in a factory. So Barnes is very familiar with the Milwaukee area. Reporting in Milwaukee, I'm Tyler Peters.
And there we see numbers with an estimated vote total in of 5%. The incumbent ahead, 52 to 47%. And those margins will certainly change throughout the evening and into the morning, perhaps. And our network of reporters there with the Evers and Michaels campaigns. We'll get back here on NBC 15 at 8:56 with another live update from them. Okay, we're going to toss over. We're lucky. We have Vanessa Reza here,
absolutely,
who is covering on digital here, continuing the live stream for us. She is in our newsroom, and it's going to continue throughout the night. She has her own panel of experts there.
So we're going to take a short break to ready everyone for the news at 9. And right now, our digital anchor, Vanessa Reza, will take over the stream. She joins us now live from our newsroom, where she's been gathering new information to share with all of you.
All right, thank you, John and Maria. As you just mentioned, I'm live here in the newsroom at our digital news desk. Now, that means for those of you watching at home, if you see me reach over or glance to my left or right, that's because I'm operating all of this technology live as this happens. That also means that if you have any questions that you want answered, you can go ahead and drop them in our Facebook comments here on this live stream, and we'll see if we can get those answered for you. Having said all of that, I want to go ahead and bring in Professor Richard Haven. He is our longtime NBC 15 political analyst, and he's going to be providing his thoughts as these election results file in. Now, Haven, I want to go ahead and start with you defining a successful night for each party. What is Wisconsin's role in GOP securing Senate seats or the Democrats staying on?
Well, in terms of Wisconsin, a successful night for the Republicans certainly will be the re-election of Senator Johnson. That's very important to hold that seat if the Republicans are to take control of the United States Senate for the coming year. Now, as to the governor's race, it would be a marvelous night for the Republicans if Mr. Michaels was to defeat Governor Evers. And it would be a superb night for them, because that would mean they have control of the governor's office as well as the Assembly and the Senate. So they would be able to have essentially control of all elements of the state government for the most part. So for the Democrats, couple things to look at. First of all, if Lieutenant Governor Barnes defeats Senator Johnson, that's going to be a real blow to the national Republican effort, because they would have to pick up a seat somewhere else to overcome the loss of that incumbency seat. Second, if Governor Evers is reelected, then we'll continue with the state situation of the Republican Party controlling the legislature, but the Democratic Party, through Governor Evers, controlling the governor's office, and we would have essentially split government.
Thank you for that, Professor. My next question, I want to bring it back down to Wisconsin. Actually, first, let me bring up the final pre-election Marquette Law School poll. Now, the most important issues, according to Wisconsin voters, are inflation, public schools, crime, gun violence, an accurate vote count, and abortion policy. So my question to you is, how have you seen these important topics play out in the campaigns in these two big races? Do you think that the campaigns have done a good job incorporating them into their ads?
Oh, I think so for the most part. In the ads that I have watched, and like most Wisconsin citizens, I've seen more than I wanted to. But what we have seen over and over again, many of the Republican ads have been attacks on the Democrats on the issue of crime and inflation, or the economy in general. And then in terms of the Democrats, there's been a strong focus on the loss of the Roe versus Wade decision by the Supreme Court, the change there, and then the attacks on both Senator Johnson and Mr. Michaels in terms of their positions on going forward in Wisconsin for abortion rights, or abortion access. Therefore, yeah, we've seen these issues, be prominent. We've seen some comments on the public schools, but, I don't think they've been nearly as dominant as the crime, the inflation, and the abortion issues.
Now, we've talked a little bit about this offline, and I want you to touch on the use of emotion as a motivation to vote. Can you touch on that and how the campaigns have incorporated that?
We talk about three classical kinds of appeals when you're trying to persuade someone. In this case, persuade them to vote a certain way. Those are logical appeals, emotional appeals, and ethical appeals. Now, in terms of emotional appeals, I think they tend to be the most powerful of the three. And they are powerful because they touch upon innate feelings that people have. What we're seeing a lot of in the Republican attack ads that have been running now for the last month and so, or 6 weeks, excuse me, has been an appeal to fear. And it's the fear of crime, the claim that crime is out of hand, and that the Democrats are to blame, and therefore It's designed to scare the voter and to motivate them to want to have a change in the state. In terms of the Democratic arguments on abortion, we've also seen fear being used, message that, especially to women and young women, that in many ways, the loss of the constitutional right to an abortion means that there could be a situation when they don't have a choice and they think they need one. Excuse me.
My next question, what do you make of the spending on these campaigns, and how does that impact results? Do you see any correlation there in terms of past races in Wisconsin political history?
Well, first thing we would note is that we've seen more spending this year than ever before. And that's because it's a swing state. There's so much at stake nationally as well as regionally or locally. Second, I think you're seeing two kinds of spending.
Go ahead and grab some water if you need, Professor, by all means.
Thank you very much. You've seen two kinds of spendings. The spending by the campaigns and the spending by outside groups. One of the interesting things about spending on television and radio advertising is that when the campaigns spend it, it costs them less. When the outside PACs spend, they have to actually pay the going rate that a business would pay. So Republicans are having to pay a lot more in many states, maybe not as much in Wisconsin, because the campaigns were outfunded by the Democrats.
Yeah, and just to provide some context for our viewers here, I do have some numbers from NBC News for the Wisconsin U.S. Senate seat for the Democratic Party, which would be Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. That's around $41.9 million in spending. Whereas Republican, which would be incumbent Senator Ron Johnson, at $47.0 million. And that's a look at ad spending from Ad Impact from September 6th through November 11th. That includes future bookend spend in the 12 races, drawing the most spending over that period as of October 28th. So just to provide some context for that question there, to give viewers an idea of those numbers. Moving on now. What are your thoughts on the questions of election integrity? We've seen lawsuits filed in battleground states, including Wisconsin, specifically that Republican lawsuit that secured an order blocking state election guidance that told local officials that they could fill or correct certain information that was missing from absentee ballot certifications. What do you make of some of these questions in terms of election integrity?
Well, I think there are two elements to it. Clearly, the elections in Wisconsin, not just this year, but over the last quarter century, if not longer, have been well-run elections. I think Wisconsin has one of the best reputations for the work the clerks do, the volunteers do, as they deal with all this. We know, unfortunately, with the controversies following the presidential election of 2020, that there's an increased concern for integrity, even though we have not seen any evidence of widespread fraud or anything close to that. What that comes to is that, I used to talk about this with my students in class, perception is more powerful than reality. And so for a segment of the audience, there's the perception that the elections may not be fair. The evidence doesn't suggest that, but there's the emotional appeal overwhelming the logical appeal.
Next, Professor, what are you expecting in terms of voter turnout? We saw during that special edition of Unspun with Lee and our other analysts that they were saying that youth voter turnout was really coming in today, especially in UW-Madison. We had our NBC 15 Marcus Arsvold there earlier today. What do you make of that youth vote, that 18 to 24 age gap turning out today?
If in fact that is an indication that the vote turnout is higher than in a non-presidential election year, normally college students turn out much more for presidential elections. They're just more exciting. But if it is higher than, say, 2018, that's a sign, I think, that the abortion issue is having impact, excuse me, and that the issues that some of the young people are concerned about, whether it's about the universities and how they're run or about the economics of the situation, are having an impact on them. But I tend to believe that the abortion issue may be the biggest issue there.
Next, Professor, what do you make of this, the Trump effect, in short language, this old versus new guard of the Republican Party in Wisconsin? We do know that for the gubernatorial candidate, Tim Michels, that he did receive backing from President Donald Trump. Do you see that as a golden ticket in this race? Do you see that as a kiss of death? How do you interpret Trump's backing there in that race, as well as the overall feel of the Republican Party following Trump's presidency?
Well, it's neither a golden ticket nor a kiss of death. It was very important, not only in Wisconsin, but in other states in the Republican primary. There are a significant number of Republican voters who turn out for the primary who are supportive of Donald Trump. Trump has control of the Republican Party right now. So in the case of Tim Michels, you might have noticed that he made a big deal of being endorsed by Trump in the primary. He's not mentioning that now. In the general election, he's talking about other issues. That's not atypical. The problem in Wisconsin is that President Trump has attacked Assembly Speaker Voss and attempted to defeat him in the primary, and now in the general election, he's trying again. That's splitting the party from the traditional Republicans to those who Donald Trump thinks should support him, or they're not members of the Republican Party in his definition. That's a problem for the Republicans going forward as they move towards the 2024 presidential election, because as you see more of those kinds of attacks by President Trump, such as on Speaker Voss, but also on Senator McConnell from Kentucky. That kind of split, and now he's attacking DeSantis in Florida. So those splits will create some problems, I think, more in 2024 than they are causing for Republicans in Wisconsin today.
Now, I know we've seen some of those full screens there, and there's been some results trickling in, very, very small, albeit, but there have been some results. A lot of eyes are on the Badger State tonight. A lot of people watching these two big races, but there is a potential for these results to be delayed, right? That counting process certainly takes time. How quickly do you anticipate we'll get results in the race for governor as well as this U.S. Senate seat, just based on your experience in watching past elections?
Well, my guess is that the governor's race will go on longer than the Senate race. But again, it depends on whether Lieutenant Governor Barnes is clearly caught up, according to the polls, with Senator Johnson. But in the governor's race, it's Mr. Michels has caught up to Governor Evers, and in the polls, and therefore that suggests it's going to be a close race. It reminds me a bit of what happened in 2018 as the Evers-Walker race went late into the night. One of the things to watch is how close they are before Milwaukee County reports their absentee ballots. And I remember in 2018, it was a very close race. It looked like Walker might make it, and then it was announced there were still thousands and thousands of uncounted votes in the absentee. They always count them last. And when those came in, Governor Evers had won the election. So I'm expecting the governor's race to go along that same pattern. We'll see whether there is enough votes for Mr. Michels that Governor Evers won't be able to use that last count in Milwaukee, or whether the turnout is so high in Dane County and Milwaukee County that both Lieutenant Governor Barnes and Governor Evers benefit to the point of being elected.
Let's talk about that closeness. According to that final pre-election Marquette Law School poll, it had the governor's race neck and neck, while for the U.S. Senate seat, it had Ron Johnson up. What do you make of that polling, and how do you see that being played out tonight?
Well, in the they were dead heat in the governor's race, but remember that could swing several ways. We really don't know. What we do know is that Tim Michels had been gaining on Governor Evers. Governor Evers had a notable lead in the polls a few weeks before, so the momentum seemed to be with Mr. Michels. The same thing is true in the reverse for Senator Johnson and Lieutenant Governor Barnes. Senator Johnson opened a fairly notable lead in polls a few weeks before, and then in that Marquette Law School poll, suddenly Lieutenant Governor Barnes had essentially caught Senator Johnson, again, because both were within the margin of error. So we just don't know if that meant that there was a notable surge for Lieutenant Governor Barnes, and therefore, he may be in a position where he's gaining more. The number one thing for Lieutenant Governor Barnes is noting how he does in Milwaukee County. How big is the turnout, and how big of a victory does he get in Milwaukee County? If he gets a big enough one, he could achieve the upset.
All right, thank you so much, Professor. That is our last question for this interview segment. For now, live in the newsroom, Vanessa from our digital news desk. I'm going to go ahead and send it back to the studio with John and Maria.
You're streaming for our special election night coverage.
We have team coverage and expert analysis as the results come in.
And we have some new numbers to share with you. That's what everyone wants to know tonight when the polls have been closed for nearly an hour. And with 31% of the estimated vote in, the incumbent Tony Evers with a 54% to 46% lead over the challenger Tim Michels. So we'll continue to watch these numbers here as they come in throughout the evening. But Tony Evers, looking for that second term right now, has the lead there. So we have a network of reporters across the state from Madison to Milwaukee on this race.
So let's begin with the incumbent, Governor Tony Evers, his watch party. The governor's watch party is here in Madison at the Orpheum Theater on State Street, and that's where we find NBC 15's Elizabeth Wattis. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Maria and John. The music is bumping here at the Evers campaign. All of the supporters are actually to my left, and that's why you can't see anybody behind me right now. But I just talked with a supporter, and the energy in here is getting more rowdy. The supporter told me that they spent the day going door to door, making sure people had what they needed to make their vote count. And that really goes with Governor Tony Evers' message that we heard when he was voting today, that every vote is going to count tonight. This race for Wisconsin governor is so tight, and it has been in recent polls. And now that we're seeing these votes coming in, we'll get random cheers from the crowd when they put the governor's race up there with Tony Evers in the lead right now, but still so many votes to count. We will be here in downtown Madison as that happens. For now, live in Madison, Elizabeth Wattis, NBC 15 News.
Elizabeth, thanks. Let's now go to NBC 15's Michelle Beck.
She is live with Evers' challenger, businessman Tim Michels, and his supporters who have gathered in Milwaukee tonight.
Yeah, John and Maria, I just want to touch on that, the fact that we are live in Milwaukee. Now, what is the significance of Milwaukee? We've heard this city named a lot, frankly, throughout Michels' campaign. It's a city that he says has high crime rates. And to give you some context on that, the database from the Journal Sentinel shows us that there have been 194 homicides so far, 24 more than this date last year. So that is something that he likes to point out. And I talked to one supporter here here behind me. He mentions that the top reason he is a Tim Michael supporter is related to crime. He mentioned that his brother is a police officer in the Milwaukee department, so he has an interesting perspective on crime here in the city. But also, what does Tim Michaels, what else does he have to say about crime here? Well, he does point to the defund the police movement. We heard it in the gubernatorial debate. He has used that to blame the rising crime rates here in Milwaukee.
All right, Michelle Beck, thank you for that. Let's look at the U.S. Senate numbers right now, where the challenger is actually ahead by the margin that the incumbent held in the latest Marquette poll, that 2%. Mandela Barnes with 476,000, Ron Johnson 449,000. Now, what we're going to have to watch, that's with exactly about a third of the estimated vote in there. So what we're going to have to watch here throughout the night is where the numbers come in, if they're coming in from the WOW or BOW counties or from Milwaukee. Our analysts will help us out with that. But for now, right now, the challenger, the former lieutenant governor, Mandela Barnes, ahead of Ron Johnson. So another race and races we're watching very closely here in the state of Wisconsin involve the battle for Wisconsin's U.S. Senate seats.
You're looking live now at the state capitol, where Republicans are hoping to secure enough seats in the state Senate to pick up a supermajority. That would allow them to override any vetoes by Governor Evers if he's reelected. 6 of the 17 state Senate races are due to retirements, and Republicans hope to flip the ones long held by Democrats. In our area, that includes District 27, which covers western Dane County, most of Greene County, and a little bit of Rock and Lafayette counties. The Senate seat is currently held by John Erpenbach, and the Middleton native and Democrat is now retiring after 24 years in the state Senate. We're also watching returns in state Senate District 15. Now, this covers all of Rock County and parts of Greene, Dane, Jefferson, and Walworth counties. Democratic Senator Janice Ringhand is retiring after 8 years. We're also watching returns in state Senate District 15. We said that already, covering lots of Greene, Dane, Jefferson counties. Thank you for watching with us tonight, wherever you stream. We're going to go over to Lee Mills and our analysts to chat a little bit about those retiring state senators.
So let's specifically take a look at this idea about a supermajority, because we know that in the state Senate, Republicans only need to pick up 1 seat.
Right.
I'm assuming you're not concerned, Mike, about the 2 seats we outlined. They'll likely stay with Democrats. Which seats are you watching? What could potentially flip? Could Republicans have a supermajority?
I think they are going to get a supermajority tonight, and it starts with the 25th Senate District in northwestern Wisconsin, my home area, Ashland, Bayfield, Douglas, Washburn counties, Barron County. Romaine Quinn, former state assemblyman, former mayor of Rice Lake, should win that seat tonight. Those races look pretty good at the top of the ticket, which will help for sure. And then the other one in play actually is in the Eau Claire area, the 31st, Jeff Smith, Democratic incumbent. Early returns have the Republican Dave Estenson winning that seat. If Republicans win that, they get to 23, which is unprecedented.
And maybe that has a 3rd congressional district impact there, because we're talking the same area. What ones are you watching, and could Democrats pick anything up?
Well, you know, I think we're looking at Democrats running on Republican maps. You know, these are the maps that Republicans drew, their dream maps that were approved by a state court. So you would expect them to be doing better than the Democrats. I think, you know, definitely the 25th is a seat of concern. The 31st, Jeff Smith does have a tough re-election, but again, you know, we are pretty early in the night in terms of the percentage of the vote in. We'll see how this goes. I think other seats to watch would be the 19th in the Fox Valley and the 5th in suburban Milwaukee.
What about in the Assembly? Republicans would have to pick up 5, which I know that you believe there is a path, but that's harder to achieve.
It's much harder. You know, they not only need to win 2 up north in the 25th, the 73rd, and the 74th. They also need to win a seat in suburban Milwaukee. Probably those 3 are the most likely. Then they need to win the 94th in Onalaska. Ryan Hipsch is running against incumbent Steve Doyle. And then probably either the 54th, the outgoing Gordon Hintz seat in Oshkosh, or Tip McGuire's seat down in Kenosha.
Yeah, and I think I would agree the Republicans have a much tougher road to a supermajority in the state assembly. You know, they are defending a couple seats, which is unlike in the state Senate. You know, the 33rd kind of in the Jefferson County, Whitewater area, and also the 84th in suburban Milwaukee. Definitely some strong Democratic challenges to seats previously held by Republicans.
So much that we can talk about. I'm glad you guys are going to be with us all night here, streaming wherever you are watching. Thank you for doing that with us. We are going to take a quick break. These are all of the options. You can stream live with us now, and we'll be back in just a moment.
This is an NBC 15 News Decision 2022 update. The battle in the battleground.
Well, welcome to this election update. I'm seeing here from some viewers in the area. They are still standing in line in Dane County in the town of Middleton, and they've been in line for quite a while. Wow, there's some long lines around the polling areas, and we've got some numbers to get to you. We've been getting some results in. But
first we want to check in with our field crews covering the governor's race.
NBC 15's Michelle Beck joins us in Milwaukee with the challenger, the Tim Michels campaign. Michelle, tell us the feeling in the rooms. We see that the incumbent, Tony Evers, is ahead there in the early numbers. So how is the room there?
Yeah, we certainly see lots of people looking closely at the TV monitors that show the numbers as they come in right now. But overall, you know, everyone's mingling, everyone's talking with each other. And from the campaign team, when I spoke with them earlier this evening, they said they were confident. I mean, when I asked what are next steps if he were not to win, a campaign spokesperson just told me he's gonna win. So that is the kind of energy and atmosphere here in the room right now. But I do want to point out one of the things that Tim Michels has been fighting for, and that's education. I mean, there might be lots of parents here in the room behind me today, too. But one of the most unique points about Tim Michels, the Republican challenger to Democrat Tony Evers, is that of school choice. Now, back in August, we did see him tweet saying that he will make sure to include universal school choice in his first budget. And so just to explain a little bit about what that is, now currently the Wisconsin school choice system is limited in enrollment and family income. However, universal school choice would essentially take off those limits and allow families to get taxpayer-funded dollars to send their kids to private schools. And so that's one of the things that Tim Michels stands for. We'll be exploring some more topics as the night goes on. In Milwaukee, I'm Michelle Beck.
Michelle, thanks. Governor Evers supporters gathering tonight in Madison. So here's NBC 15's Elizabeth Wattis.
Yeah, John and Maria, I'm here at the Orpheum Theater in downtown Madison, and this room is filling up with supporters, but they're kind of congregating on one side of the room. So we're going to kind of look through the other cameras here so you can see Evers' supporters filling up the Orpheum Theater right now. I talked with a supporter. He told me he was canvassing all day for the governor, still up to Election Day. We also saw on Twitter that the governor spent a lot of time in downtown Madison, even on campus today at UW, trying to garner that support from young kids. And I also just spoke with one person from his campaign. I asked, how long are you expecting a long night here? When will you leave if the race is not called? He said they're going to have to kick us out for them to leave. So we will be here all night reporting live in Madison. Elizabeth Wattis, NBC 15 News.
That's the same thing I told our boss. They just have to kick us out until the numbers are in. It's a very busy night for our news team as we're tracking more than 200 total races.
And we will be back here on NBC 15 at 9:26 with another election update. Right now, join us wherever you stream for more continuous team coverage, or tune in to NBC 15 News at 9 on our sister station, the CW Madison.
Wisconsin's voters have spoken. The votes are being counted. Wisconsin and the nation now wait to see who emerges victorious, challenger, or incumbent. Our NBC 15 News team is standing by around the state. to bring you results and reaction. A special election night edition of NBC 15 News. The battle in the battleground starts now.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us at 9. I'm Maria Lizignoli. Today is Election Day. All eyes are on Wisconsin's race for governor and Senate.
Yeah, we're keeping you updated on these important races with team coverage from Madison, Milwaukee, and Neenah. Now, the polls closed just an hour ago, but we're hearing from some people who were still in line 20 minutes ago. Results are slowly starting to come in, and actually in some of the races, they've been coming in rather quickly, with an estimated 41% of the governor's total in. Tony Evers with a 52 to 47% lead over the challenger, Tim Michels. So we're now up above the 40% threshold. We did hear NBC saying a while ago that at 11 o'clock they will be dropping the absentee ballots in to be counted, and we will continue to follow that.
All right, well, let's begin our election team coverage with the Michels and Evers campaigns. Let's first head to NBC 15's Michelle Beck, who's live with us in Milwaukee at the Michels watch party.
Hey, John and Maria, yes, this is Milwaukee. We're live at the Italian Community Center. And I just want to jump right into the topic of crime. That's maybe one of the reasons we are here in Milwaukee, because Milwaukee is a city that Tim Michels has named throughout his entire campaign. And get this, one of the craziest stats that I heard from the latest Marquette Law School poll is that nearly half, 48% of Milwaukee residents say they did not feel safe about going about their daily lives. And that's exactly the kind of sentiment that I heard from one supporter here. He said his top reason for voting for Tim Michels is crime. And so, you know, there are 194 homicides this year. That's according to a Journal Sentinel database here encapsulating the idea of crime here in Milwaukee. But that is just one of the reasons that Tim Michels has spoken about crime throughout his entire campaign. So what is he going to do about it? Tim Michels has said throughout the campaign trail, that he wants to change the parole process. Now, we do know that governors cannot grant paroles. We do know, however, that they can appoint people to a parole commission. And so Mr. Michels has said that he wants to appoint someone in the parole commission who will not want to release half the prison population. Yeah, live in Milwaukee, Michelle Beck, NBC 15 News.
Michelle Beck, thank you so much. Now, we are also with the Tony Evers campaign tonight, whose supporters have gathered in downtown Madison at the Orpheum Theater. NBC 15's Elizabeth Wattis joining us now.
Yeah, Maria, you just missed a big loud cheer from the crowd as they put the governor race's total up there as votes are still trickling in. Of course, a lot of votes still need to be counted here in Madison. This is the Tony Evers campaign. His supporters are making their way, mingling around. There you go, another cheer right there. The energy in here is really picking up, and supporters say they know that every vote counts tonight, and they are going to be watching very closely. Now, Governor Tony Evers also was reflecting that message earlier when he was voting today. I asked a supporter what made them vote for Tony Evers tonight, and they said a main thing that they were looking for was LGBTQ plus rights and keeping that community safe. Also, we've heard a lot about public education, funding for that. That has been a main point in the Evers campaign that we've seen for his last term as well. Now, he also was talking about more tax cuts for Wisconsinites that make less than $100,000 a year. We can look at his first term because, of course, he is the incumbent, and he did reduce taxes for most Wisconsinites by 15%. He says he wants to add 10% more to that. So the crowd here picking up. I've seen Sheriff Calvin Barrett in the crowd here. He is a Democrat, of course, trying to hold his seat tonight here in Dane County. And we will be here live, continuing this coverage here on this exciting and neck-and-neck election night. Reporting live in Madison, Elizabeth Wattis, NBC 15 News.
Well, the cheering you heard there at the Evers campaign party was when they put this full screen up, because the Democratic challenger, Mandela Barnes, is leading the incumbent, Ron Johnson, who's seeking a third term. And the estimated vote total in is at about 42%. And Barnes has a 2% lead, which is a flip of what the Marquette Law School poll showed us last week. So we'll continue to watch that as numbers come in here in the U.S. Senate seat race between incumbent Ron Johnson and challenger Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. Now, NBC 15's Tyler Peters and Colt Molesky are covering that campaign for us tonight. Let's first turn to Tyler, where the music is playing. He's live in Milwaukee at the Mandela Barnes campaign event.
All right, sounds like the music is a little too loud at the Barnes event. Tyler, thank you so much. Barnes is challenging incumbent Senator Ron Johnson, who is seeking to defend his third seat for a third term. So let's go to NBC 15's Colt Molesky with the latest from the Johnson campaign in Neenah.
As you can see, there's a lot of people here at the election headquarters for Senator Ron Johnson. I was talking with some people about why they felt it was important for them to be. Seat. Now, I talked with his campaign, and they are telling me that they are just waiting things out. They've heard from various sources across the state at different polling locations about how many people are showing up to vote, and they're saying that all of it is a little too murky to bank on. They're waiting for those results to keep rolling in throughout the rest of the night. Looks like we're in for a bit of a long night as we wait on those election results. Here in Neenah, Colt Molesky, NBC 15 News.
All right, Colton, also, we're following the race for Dane County Sheriff tonight. Now, incumbent Calvin Barrett was appointed by the governor and is taking on one of his current employees, Anthony Hamilton, the first time he's run for the office now after being appointed. NBC 15's Cameron Kelly joins us with an update on this race.
I've been in contact with both candidates. Hamilton tells me he's excited for results to roll in. I've not heard from Barrett tonight. Things to know about incumbent Calvin Barrett. If elected, he says he will continue to work on lowering the jail population. Barrett says he would like to provide tools to help people from returning back into the system. Candidate Anthony Hamilton says if elected, he would like to focus on reforming flawed practices. Hamilton says he wants to do things that are being more transparent to the community. He says traditional policing strategies are not totally flawed, but in some circumstances, they create tension in communities. Right now, we know Calvin Barrett is with incumbent Governor Tony Evers tonight, and his opponent, Anthony Hamilton, is spending time with his family and friends. Live in the newsroom, Cameron Kelly, NBC 15 News.
Okay, let's look at the latest numbers, which we have none in that race. Sometimes those come in a little bit later, but we'll continue to follow that race. And another race, Iowa County Sheriff, we're looking for is Steve Mitchek is retiring there. And we do have numbers there of 54% to 46%, the Republican over the independent challenger. So Michael Peterson with the lead there. There'll be a new sheriff in Iowa County for the first time in well over a decade. Allen has 16 years of experience in law enforcement, the past 11 with Madison Police, and Peterson holds 18 years of working for the Iowa County Corrections and Emergency Dispatch.
When early risers hit the polls this morning, the Wisconsin Elections Commission was up with them answering questions. The WEC says they received calls about polling locations and absentee ballots. Chief Election Official Megan Wolf at WEC says as of this morning, there were more than 815,000 ballots requested and over 741,000 returned. Wolf says her team noticed voters are really interested in this election, and most of those eager voters participated through absentee.
I think think over the last 2 years, as we've seen, there's an increase in the number of absentee ballots. And so especially for our central count jurisdictions, they have a lot of ballots to process. But they've had the last 2 years to continue to make their process more efficient.
Now, Wolf says in 2020, Wisconsin had about 6% of absentee mail, but there is more than 60% in this election.
And as I mentioned, in Milwaukee County, we're going to be seeing those come in about 11 o'clock. So that a big county, of course. The Democrats are hoping for high numbers like they have in Dane County.
And as results do continue to come in, make NBC 15 your decision 2022 election headquarters. We have continuous coverage until the big races are called. Our team will have more live reports from across the state and experts to break it all down right here in our studio, still ahead tonight. You can find us on NBC15.com, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, as well as YouTube and Facebook Live. All right, taking a live look now at our state's capital as we near the end of this election day. Meteorologist Brian Dukes joining us now for your first alert forecast. Not too bad out today.
Yeah, not bad at all. And it's going to get a little cooler, though, right, Brian?
Yeah, I think by the end of the week, a much different story. Election day really worked in our favor. Temperatures running a little bit above normal. Average highs on election day, 49, average lows 34. We've been as warm as 76, as cold as 7. I went through the record books all the way back to 1869 and found that only about a quarter of election days in the fall feature rain. Only 6% have featured snow. The wettest, 1.61 inches of rain. The snowiest, 7.2 inches of snow back in 1921. Looks like warm air will win out the next couple of days. 63 tomorrow, a record high of 71 expected on Thursday. From there, though, we will track showers and storms, and this will bring much, much colder air as we round out the week and head into the weekend. Of course, we'll have much more on that coming up in your full First Alert forecast.
Coming up at 9, we head back to our political analysts with the latest on the results of this tonight's election.
All right, I am back with our political analysts who are joining us throughout the evening. If you've been watching on our social media platforms or where we've been streaming all evening, you've seen them. Bill McCoshen and Mike Brown, thank you for being with us all night. I know there are 72 counties in Wisconsin, but we talk about 8 that we really pay attention to in terms of how these candidates are going to do overall statewide. We've seen very high turnout, Mike, in Milwaukee and Dane counties. How are you feeling in terms of how that's going to play into these two top statewide races we're following?
I mean, I think from the Democrats' perspective, those two counties are critical to the math that they need to come up with to get to 50% plus one. You know, the formula is pretty well set and has been over a number of election cycles. Is that Democrats need to do well in Dane County and Milwaukee County, and they need to, you know, basically not get blown out in the Fox Valley, you know, remain competitive there, and, you know, do well enough in the WOW counties, though, that I imagine Bill will talk about. You know, Waukesha County, for example, that's the third most Democratic votes out of a county in the state generally in our statewide elections.
So talk about the WOW and the BOW. What are you seeing, and what does this mean for Johnson's reelection and Michael's challenge?
Well, in the WOW, Waukesha, Ozaukee, Washington, those three counties can offset either Dane or Milwaukee, but not both. And right now, it appears the Democrats have presidential level turnouts in both Dane and Milwaukee. So you need three things to win a statewide race, Lee. You need message, organization, and money. Democrats clearly have their organization figured out in Dane and Milwaukee counties tonight, and today, and over the last couple of days. I thought message was going to carry the day. We're going to see. I think these races are going to go a lot later, but Democrats are off to a pretty good start.
Okay. Is there one county in particular that...
I'm nervous about Waukesha County. Michaels is underperforming his numbers. He needs to be around 63%. He's at about 59.5%. Johnson's hitting his numbers in Waukesha County, so there does appear to be a little bit of a drop-off. So that's what's worrying me, both the turnout in Dane and Milwaukee and the underperformance so far in Waukesha.
And that means those Republican voters would be voting in the Senate race and skipping over the governor's race in that case. Okay. Thank you for staying with us. We will check back in with you shortly.
And now, your first alert forecast from NBC 15.
All right, we had a very nice election day across southern Wisconsin, but we are gearing up for what will bring record warmth as we head through the next couple of days, and then a very potent fall-like storm system as we head into Thursday evening and Thursday night. Here's what we know right now. Line of showers and storms is expected late Thursday, likely continuing into early Thursday night. Here's what we really don't know yet and still have some questions on: the strength of this line and the overall severe potential. Right now, severe weather is favoring southern portions of Minnesota, central Iowa, down through Kansas and Missouri. We are close enough that we are in a level 1 risk, Madison westward, for some strong to severe storms. That means some isolated strong to severe storms are possible. We'll have to keep a close eye on this. If the new data overnight and tomorrow is showing this to be a better chance, we may need to consider a first alert day. We'll wait for the new data to come in because it doesn't look like it's going to be a slam dunk locally, as it will be just to our west. Regardless, this is abnormal for November. Typically, we're talking snow, not chances of severe weather twice in a 7-day period. 44 degrees in Madison right now. Winds out of the southeast at 6 to dew points at 36. Temperatures just about at their lows for the night. We may drop off another degree or two, and then I think we level off after midnight with the southerly winds. We're actually going to start climbing, and I think by tomorrow morning, these 50s you see to our south, well, that's what will be on our doorstep, and a warm start, of course, means a very warm finish. We'll have no problem getting into the 60s tomorrow. Here's the latest, though, on SkyTracker HD. Warm front to the south and west, spinning off some showers and storms, but look at the direction, more north and east. So we're not really expecting this to clip our area. Maybe far northern Juneau and Adams, you're going to get a couple raindrops this evening and tonight. The rest of southern Wisconsin, you are dry. The best chance of rain won't be for another day or so. Let's take you through time here. Clouds on the increase tonight. Tomorrow, partly to mostly cloudy. There is a chance of a spotty shower tomorrow. I think most places are dry, but we will keep a 10-20% chance. I think we're dry tomorrow night. We see early sunshine Thursday. That gets us into the 70s. We're setting records, and then we track that line of showers and storms by late Thursday. Here we go. You can see it. It comes and goes pretty quickly, but that's the line that will have the potential of some of the strong to severe storms, gusty winds being the main threat, and then Arctic air will rush in behind that. Yes, you're seeing this right. Severe weather in a matter of hours turns over to some flurries by your Friday. 40s tonight, climbing to around 50 by daybreak. Tomorrow, 63, mostly cloudy, isolated shower. 71 to 38 for the high Friday, and then we're into the 30s through the weekend. We'll keep some flurries all the way into next week. I think our best chance of some snow showers will arrive next Tuesday. We'll keep an eye on that as we head forward in time.
Not a busy day for Dukes, thankfully, today, but it sure is for us.
And we'll continue to follow the elections right after this. An armed man has been taken into custody after he stormed into a West Bend polling location demanding election workers, quote, stop the voting. This happened around noon at the city's community library. Officials say the man threatened workers there with a knife. Library workers then called police, who were able to detain the man without further incident. No injuries reported. Charges against the suspect are expected.
Madison police sharing photos today to renew their ask for help in identifying an individual who was driving recklessly downtown. Now, this happened back on July 13th on the 900 block of East Washington Avenue. Officials say the driver was operating at excessive speeds and eluded officers multiple times. So anyone with information should contact Madison police. We'll be right back. All right, thank you so much for watching tonight.
Yep, we'll continue to follow the results. You can follow them at the bottom of your screen. You can switch over to NBC 15 and our live streams for continued coverage here on these very important 2022 midterm elections. Thanks for tuning in.
This is an NBC 15 News Decision 2022 update. The battle in the battleground.
Good evening. Election night, always exciting, especially when the results come rolling in as they have been for the last hour and 25 minutes.
We are closely watching many statewide and local races. One of those is the race for governor here in the Badger State.
All right, we have team coverage tonight from Madison to Milwaukee. Let's begin with the incumbent, Governor Tony Evers, seeking a second term, and his watch party is in downtown Madison, and so is NBC 15's Elizabeth Wattis.
Yep, downtown Madison in the Orpheum Theater, and you can tell the music is bumping and there are people filling in all behind me here. Everyone here to support Governor Tony Evers. Actually, just to my left right now, Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson just showing up here as well, and I just spoke with the current Dane County Sheriff Calvin Barrett, who is also running tonight. Now, when those results come in on the screen, people are cheering. The energy very high here. People say we need Governor Tony Evers in office to support our education, to support our infrastructure, roads and bridges, and also to help Wisconsinites through inflation. So we will be here all night. People, again, are really excited. We have not seen the governor yet. I know that he did spend a good portion of his day out campaigning, not only downtown Madison, but on campus as well at UW. And I talked with his campaign manager not too long ago, and he says the governor is spending time with his family tonight and that we might not see him until later on. So we are still going to be looking out tonight, hanging out with supporters, talking more about why they think the governor is the right man for the job in this neck-and-neck race here for Wisconsin governor. Before reporting live in Madison, I'm Elizabeth Wattis, NBC 15 News.
All right, and Michelle Beck is with the Michaels campaign. We will check in with her in a little bit. If we can, we could get those governor's race numbers, get the latest ones up, and we'll bring you up to speed on that. But in the meantime, another race we are closely watching, of course, here in Wisconsin is the battle for Wisconsin's open U.S. Senate seat.
And we will be back here for news at 10 with another election update. Right now, John, tell us how many votes estimated in right now?
Yeah, half of the vote is in, and the challenger, Mandela Barnes, still maintaining that 2% lead over the incumbent, Ron Johnson, with half the vote in. So this is going to be interesting to watch, especially when we get a lot more votes in from Milwaukee County, when the absentee ballots there are counted. And hopefully we'll get an idea from our analysts just how many of those votes have been coming in the counties that the senator, Ron Johnson, is counting on to get that third term. So it's going to be an interesting race to watch tonight. Now, there are those governor's numbers with a little more than 50%, 51% of the estimated vote in. And Governor Evers now with a 5% lead over the challenger, Tim Michaels. About 758,500 votes for the governor, 681,672 for Tim Michaels. So, and again, the challenger there did endorse Tim Michaels, but she ended up still on the ballot. Names can stay on the ballot after the fact. And some people that would suspect that perhaps a number of those 14,000 votes have been pulled away from Tim Michaels, but we'll continue to watch these numbers as well.
And we'll be back here for NBC 15 News at 10 with another election update. Right now, our special streaming edition of NBC 15 News continues. Stick with us. In the newsroom, our results team is tracking more than 200 total races.
That's right, and our Lee Mills is here in the studio with us, along with the Unspun team, and they've been giving us analysis all night, and they'll continue to do so. We would really like some perspective behind these numbers with about half of the vote in those two critical races, Lee.
Yeah, so let's talk, and I want to show everybody the counties that we're watching. So walk over here with me, viewers here, and I want to just point out the 8 counties that we talked about. These are the ones that we're really watching to see where do those numbers come in. And the WOW specifically, those counties that surround Milwaukee County, Bill's going to talk about, because Johnson and Michaels, they have to do a certain number there in order to win statewide. We also need to see good numbers for Republicans in the Bow counties. But here's what I want to look at. These are the margins. Remember, Governor Evers won in 2018 against Walker. Evers was the challenger at that point, and you can see the margins. We're looking at numbers that show Evers getting more. It looks like people were voting for Senator Johnson and Governor Evers, which would be both parties. So what do you think is happening here? And when we look at these margins, guys, what are you seeing that either mimics or changes the narrative here?
So Johnson's hitting his numbers in Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Washington. He's probably overperforming slightly in those 3 counties. Michaels is underperforming, particularly in Waukesha County. A Republican can win statewide without winning Milwaukee or Dane County. The WOW counties can make up for the deficit in one of those 2, but not both. So Republicans are going to need to do better in the rest of the state tonight in order to overcome what appears to be almost a blue tsunami in Dane and Milwaukee counties, where the presidential level turnouts tonight, which clearly helps Democrats.
Yeah, I think, Democrats obviously are feeling pretty good about those turnout numbers in Dane and Milwaukee County. I think we've seen places like Ozaukee County over the last several years have maybe turned it a little bit more Democratic than they have in the past. I think any Republican not hitting their targets in Waukesha County has a problem. But, we'll have to wait and see how things go in the Bow counties, which is an area where Democrats still want to be competitive, if not winning outright.
So let's talk about just the idea that could there, and would you expect, you wouldn't, so that's not the question, could we see a Democrat win one of these statewide races and a Republican? And when is the last time that happened in Wisconsin?
Last time it happened was 1998. Russ Feingold won for United States Senate over Mark Newman. Tommy Thompson beat Ed Garvey for governor. So it's been 24 years since it's happened. It happened quite often prior to that, but hasn't happened since. Could it happen tonight? Looks like that's a possibility.
Could be a possibility, but if Governor Evers is running as strong as it looks like he is, I think that only helps Lieutenant Governor Barnes in his challenge to Senator Johnson.
Yeah, who is still in the lead, but it's a very tight margin. Looks like it's about 2,000 votes at this point. Gentlemen, thank you. We'll check back in with you shortly.
Great to have you with us. Thanks for that analysis, all 3 of you there. And election night's always so exciting in a newsroom. Not only do you get the pizza and the sandwiches, which we love, we love to see the results come in, and we love to tell you about it. It's a historical night, always an election, because you're sort of on the front lines of history here. And our streaming coverage continues with more live reports and expert analysis.
So we're going to send it on over to our digital anchor, Vanessa Reza. We're going to take a short break, get ready for the 10 p.m. over on NBC 15. But she is gathering all information, new information to share with you all. Vanessa, thanks for joining us.
All right, thanks so much, John and Maria. As you just mentioned, I'm here live in the newsroom at our digital news desk. So for those of you who are watching, if you see me reach or look over to my sides, that's because I'm operating all of this technology live as it's happening. I'm going to go ahead and bring in our Gray DC News Bureau reporter. This is Brendan Cullerton. Now, Brendan, you're following a few races here in our region, especially here in Wisconsin. Can you talk about what you have your close eye on and their implications?
Well, as far as Wisconsin goes, I'm kind of hearing, or I'm looking at both the gubernatorial race and the race for Senate. And the one thing I've kind of noticed that's caught my attention there is that Evers is running about 5 points ahead of Mandela Barnes. The race for governor looking to be a lot better for Democrats in the state than the race for Senate. So that's what's kind of caught my eye as we kind of approach midnight here on election night.
Thank you, Brendan. And I noticed you just took your IFB out. I just want to note that for viewers, again, this technology is all live and he's getting a bit of feedback there. So that's why you'll probably see him remove that and put that back in.
Yeah, I'm hearing myself. It's making it a little tough.
Yes, we're making it work. We appreciate you providing this analysis. So we'll keep on muscling through it. So can you talk about some of the issues for this Senate race in particular and provide some context? I know there's been a lot of talk about supermajority and flipping seats. So can you talk about the challenges ahead for that race as we see election results file in?
Well, when you talk supermajority, that's really more about the gubernatorial race. The balance of power is important nationally as far as that race for Senate. So the issues in Senate, the issues in the race for governor are mostly the same. The one thing that kind of differentiates itself in the gubernatorial race is what both Tony Evers and Tim Michels have said they'll do when it comes to abortion law in the state, because that's obviously something Ron Johnson or Mandela Barnes, they wouldn't have control over in a federal office. outside of that, you know, the economy is obviously the most important issue in Wisconsin, as it is in all other states.
Thanks, Brendan. Next, what do you make of the voter demographics in Wisconsin? We've talked about it being a battleground state. What do you make of these campaigns targeting certain groups, or perhaps even just the swing voters as a demographic as a whole? Can you elaborate on that here in Wisconsin?
Absolutely, and I think the key thing with Wisconsin is not the kinds of voters you're targeting. Wisconsin isn't really a state where the campaigns go out and they convince independent voters to vote one way or another. Wisconsin is a purple state, but it's a very polarized state. There's not a middle to be won over. The races in Wisconsin are really more about turning out your own base. It's about drumming up support from your supporters and getting them out to the polls. So when you see talk of purple states nationwide, some of them operate that way. Some of them are different, where there is kind of a middle ground or an independent class of voters to win over. Very few independents in Wisconsin. There's a lot of people with very strong opinions. It's about getting them to the polls, really.
I'm curious on your thoughts about this old versus new guard in Wisconsin's Republican Party. What can you speak to in terms of Trump's impact on Wisconsin Republicans?
I think the biggest key impact of Trump's impact that you're seeing in the races tonight is probably the lack of domination in what's known as the WOW counties. That's Washington, that's Ozaukee. You know, it's Republicans just haven't done as well in the suburbs in Wisconsin, and that's probably the biggest lasting impact of Trump's impact on the state, because that was the bedrock of the Scott Walker Republican Party in Wisconsin. And when you talk about the old guard, you're talking about Reince Priebus, you're talking about Paul Ryan, you're talking about Scott Walker, you're talking about Ron Johnson. Only one of those names that I just mentioned is still there. That's Ron Johnson. So, you know, you look at that and you see, can Tim Michaels win as more of a Trump-style candidate? Right now, it's not looking good for him, but there's probably going to be two waves that come in the state as we kind of approach the finality of these races. One of those waves is going to be the Northwoods votes coming in. That's going to be good for Ron Johnson. That's going to be good for Tim Michaels. A lot of those kind of counties, they're very Republican. They're always very good for Republican candidates. Those votes haven't come in yet. The next wave, that's going to come in later. That was going to be, this was a big controversy in the presidential race. It's going to be the same again. I don't know how controversial it's going to be, but that's the absentee and mail-in ballots that come in both Milwaukee and Kenosha. Because Wisconsin has a state law where you can't count those ballots until Election Day, and that takes even longer in counties that have what's known as a central count, where they bring them all to the same area and then count them. That's Kenosha and especially Milwaukee. So the last wave of votes you're going to see is going to be the latest batch of votes in Milwaukee. So basically, Republican officials know they need to, quote unquote, run up the score earlier in the night to withstand that late surge from votes coming in Milwaukee.
All right, thank you so much. That is, again, our Gray DC News Bureau reporter, Brendan Cullerton, for us. Brendan, we will go ahead and check back in with you in about an hour or so. I want to go ahead.
Maybe we'll have more results in by then.
Absolutely. Thanks again. I want to go ahead and bring in now a familiar face who we just spoke with about an hour ago. Professor Richard Haven joins us again now. Professor, we just spoke an hour ago about a number of things, but I want to go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into that conversation that we had. Specifically, let's take a closer look at some of the issues like inflation, crime, and abortion, looking at who's to blame or whether governor or senator who wins tonight is able to have a big impact on those issues brought up by voters.
Well, Vanessa, let's start with inflation. You know, it is in many ways the number one issue in Wisconsin and nationally. And the number one indicator on inflation, and maybe 1 and 2, are food and gasoline. And, it's interesting when you look at those, uh, the inflation that's occurring is not occurring because of something particularly done in the state. It's because of what's happening both in the nation and internationally. So the pandemic has contributed to this. The breakdown of the supply chain and the global marketplace has contributed to it. The uh, the war in Ukraine has contributed to it. And we look at gasoline prices and to some extent food prices. Now, yes, some of the actions that are taken by the federal government have probably contributed some as well. But I don't think it's really something that you say, well, if you just vote in this governor or that senator, suddenly it's going to change. It's a much bigger issue, but it's fairly typical that when something like the rise in inflation or a breakdown in the economy, excuse me, occurs, then we tend to see those in power get blamed. That it's on their watch, therefore it's their fault. And so I think it's important to kind of step back and say, not atypical of a political race, but when we talk about the issue of inflation, it's really so much bigger, and especially much bigger today because it's not just a national issue, it's an international issue. Let's take another one, crime. One of the interesting aspects about this election is the degree to which the Johnson campaign and Republicans have attacked Lieutenant Governor Barnes on the issue of crime. It obviously is a powerful issue. It may cost him the election, but in the sense that it's a Senate issue, it really is not nearly as important in the Senate as it would be in the governor's office or in the attorney general's office or in the state and local offices, because crime is much more of a state and local issue. Therefore, it does make more sense on the governor's race. But that often doesn't prevent candidates from attacking another one, even though it may not be a critical issue they'll ever face when they go to the Senate. Now let's take a look at abortion. The abortion issue emerged because of the decision by the court, which had moved to the right through the appointments of President Trump and reversed Roe. That's 50 years of precedent that has gone. Now, right after that, there happened to be a referendum vote in Kansas. And Kansas is a reliably red state. But the people of Kansas in the referendum vote voted overwhelmingly to keep Kansas a state that allows abortion. And so that was a surprise. And that helped ignite the issue for Democrats, especially. And I predicted back then, watch the Democrats in the statewide races, and they'll be attacking their opponents, the Republicans, on the abortion issue. And boy, we've seen that over and over again. How much of it is a state issue? Again, the governor's race is interesting because if Governor Evers is reelected, he's facing a Republican legislature. And they're not going to suddenly say, okay, we're going to, start abortion rights again here in Wisconsin. And if Mr. Michaels is elected, he's already said he'll accept, an amendment to the 1849 law that would allow for exceptions of health, incest, and rape. So, you're not going to see too much of a difference given the fact that you've got a Republican legislature and a Democratic governor or a Republican governor.
So definitely more to come after these results for these two top races come in tonight. Thank you so much, Professor Haven, for your insight tonight. This is the last that you'll be joining us for these interview segments because you'll be back for tomorrow morning on our morning show providing further analysis. So thank you so much. I'll let you get some rest tonight for tomorrow. I will go ahead and send it back to the studio with John and Maria. They have some updates from our crews on the ground who are following these campaigns. Thanks again, Haven.
You're welcome.
Platforms. I'm Maria Lizignoli.
And I'm John Stofflet. And as we wait for more results to come in, we have team coverage for you from Madison, Milwaukee, Nina, following all of the important campaigns.
Let's begin with the governor's race and the man challenging Governor Tony Evers. NBC 15's Michelle Beck joins us live from Milwaukee.
John and Maria, again, I'm live in Milwaukee at the Italian Community Center. And for a minute here, I just want to talk about the effect of former President Donald Trump. And why I bring that name up, because the former president famously, before the primaries, he endorsed Republican challenger Tim Michels here, who are here for tonight. And, you know, there are some mixed opinions on how much effect he had to this crowd here behind me. Now, I've seen some MAGA, Make America Great Again hats. I've also seen some Trump 2020 merchandise sweatshirts. But I've also spoken with a woman, a supporter of Tim Michels, who says the Donald Trump endorsement didn't really have that much of an effect on her vote. What she did say that was of note, that was interesting, was that, you know, she mentioned that this is the way politics is nowadays, and that coincides with the image that the Michels campaign team has tried to create for Mr. Michels, the fact that he is this political outsider. And if you were to come up with some commonalities between Donald Trump and Tim Michels, they do both have that business background. Of course, we know that Tim Michels, he is the co-owner of Michels Corporation, a big construction company here in Wisconsin, employing more than 8,000 people here. So this is all part of the biology, the makeup of Tim Michels here. For now, live in Milwaukee, I'm Michelle Beck.
All right, thank you, Michelle.
Now let's turn to NBC 15's Elizabeth Waters, who's here in Madison with the Tony Evers campaign.
Yeah, John and Maria, really fun atmosphere here in downtown Madison. I've never seen this before at a campaign event. They just did a Governor Tony Evers trivia. It was a recorded video with the governor talking about what he did as a career, what did he teach to his favorite ice cream flavor, and his supporters really loving it. I just talked with a supporter here today and asked why they are here, and they say it's because they are supporting Governor Tony Evers because of how he handled the pandemic. They say he is the candidate that supports the science. Another supporter also told me that women's rights, she is an OBGYN doctor, and she says that the issue closest to her heart and what she does is women's rights, and she believes that Governor Tony Evers is the candidate that will help the most women here in Wisconsin. So again, kind of some goofy stuff, some fun stuff going on here at the Evers camp headquarters as supporters are cheering as they keep seeing the governor ahead of his challenger Tim Michels in the polls, but still a lot of votes to be counted. For now, in Madison, Elizabeth Waters, NBC 15 News.
Elizabeth, thanks. Well, nationwide, we are following which party will take control of Congress, including the U.S. Senate. One of the seats up for grab there, right here.
And tonight we are with both the Ron Johnson campaign and the Mandela Barnes campaign. Let's begin with NBC 15's Tyler Peters in Milwaukee with the Barnes campaign.
Yeah, in the Turner Hall Ballroom here tonight, and the energy has absolutely picked up over the last hour or so. Senator Tammy Baldwin spoke moments ago. Congresswoman Gwen Moore spoke moments ago as well, energizing this crowd, getting them ready as the night goes on. And I just spoke with Democratic strategist Joe Sebecki, who told me that this is as tight of a race as you can see. And it will continue to be that way as we continue into the night. Obviously showing the results right now, it's about 50-50 going both ways with the reporting so far. And again, the campaign tells me that the energy that and support that they've received has been great so far. They're really excited about where this thing is going into the later hours tonight. This could be a long night here, that's for sure, especially after talking with Joe. Reporting in Milwaukee, I'm Tyler Peters.
Well, farther north, the incumbent Ron Johnson seeking his third term in the U.S. Senate.
NBC 15's Colton Molesky joins us live from Nina, Wisconsin.
I just spoke with Senator Ron Johnson's campaign team, and they're telling me what the latest is from the campaign war room here at their election headquarters. They're saying that they are cautiously optimistic. That's the wording that they use. They say that now Dane County and Milwaukee County have a majority of their votes in, and they're expecting a lot more votes from rural counties as they begin their counts, and they're expecting a lot of those type of counties to bring in, as we just heard, a cheer from the crowd with the latest election results going up on the TVs. Just had a big cheer from the crowd here, but they are cautiously optimistic for how this pans out as those votes continue to roll in throughout the night. In Neenah, Wisconsin, Colt Molesky, NBC 15 News.
Colton, thank you. Now, our team is following the 17 state Senate races on the ballot. Tonight, we've been talking about a number of Wisconsin state Senate seats that Republicans are hoping to flip. State Senate District 17 is not one of those seats. The incumbent Republican Senator Howard Marklein has held the seat since 2014. His opponent, Democrat Pat Scoggin, is a retired teacher and dairy farmer. Senate District 17 has had a Republican state senator since 1979, a Democrat for 3 years between 75 and 78, but then before that, a Republican held the seat for 120 years. Right now, we are seeing 63% of the votes going toward Howard Marklein, 37% toward Democrat Pat Scoggin. In seeking a supermajority, Republicans are hoping to keep this Southwest Wisconsin Senate district, which represents Juneau County, all the way down to the Iowa and Illinois border.
And as we monitor these important races, we want to get some perspective on the numbers. Numbers are numbers, but when you give them analysis and perspective, that means so much. And so, you're fast, Maria. Arlene Mills joins us now.
We appreciate that you were motivated to get back to the desk, Maria. We're all super energized tonight. It's always exciting to follow these numbers. And Mike and Bill have been with us all night. We appreciate your insights. So since Maria was just talking about Marklein, let's talk about the state Senate districts. We know that if Republicans pick up one seat, they will have a supermajority, which isn't veto-proof unless you have one also in the Assembly. They'd have to pick up 5 there. But as we look at these state Senate seats, is there anything jumping out at you in terms of maybe an opportunity to flip one of those?
Well, the Republicans down ticket seem to be doing better than the top of the ticket in many cases, which is unusual. It's usually the other way around. Republicans statewide in the state Senate have done really, really well in early returns. All of the candidates are 59% or better. So there's an opportunity for Republicans to get to 23 Senate seats tonight.
23?
23.
Okay, and they would need 22.
22.
I think, what we see here is that Republicans are running on Republican maps. They drew the maps in 2010, one of the most egregious gerrymanders in the country. They were able to build on that in 2020 with the decision by the state Supreme Court, which delivered them the maps that they drew. So you'd expect that they would do well. It seems that the 17th district, that has gotten more Republican, and Howard Marklein had a pretty significant war chest as an incumbent. He seems to be in pretty good shape there. There are a couple other places where Democrats have some opportunities potentially. I think you look at the Fox Valley and you look at suburban Milwaukee. There are a couple Senate seats there. They're maybe their best hopes, and then they need to hold on to the 31st Senate district in the Eau Claire area.
So I've got to ask, because you brought up the gerrymandering, and when you look at this, if you see a certain number of Democrats voting at the top, but you see, and these same people are voting all the way on the whole ballot. I mean, we have to acknowledge that these maps are playing a role when you see Republicans gaining so much traction down ballot.
2 things for your viewers. Number 1, the maps were approved by the Wisconsin Supreme Court. They weren't just approved by Republicans. Secondly, there'll be some differences between the Senate seats and what goes on at the top of the ticket, right? So Senate seats might be more compact. They were least change maps, which means there wasn't a lot of difference from the 2010 maps, to be honest with you, which were favorable towards Republicans. So you would expect them to do well.
What is your read on why why this flip that the top of the ticket isn't doing as well?
Well, I'm going to give Democrats credit for organization, for sure, particularly in Dane and Milwaukee County. They're rolling up some spectacular numbers here, which Republicans always have to fight against, but tonight seems to be even bigger, and there's a little bit of underperformance, at least on the Michaels side in some key counties like Waukesha. I still think Ron Johnson's in a position to hold this, to get a win tonight, but it's going to be a lot closer than I ever expected.
Are you feeling optimistic looking at these numbers?
Well, I mean, I think, if you look at what Democrats have to do to win, they need to turn out big numbers in Dane County and Milwaukee County. It certainly appears that is the case. And then it is limit your losses in some other key counties. It appears that is also the case in, Bill, you mentioned Waukesha County earlier, where, you know, Tim Michels is just not hitting the numbers that he needs to overcome some of those margins in a place like Dane County.
What is the Waukesha number? Because Walker won by almost 75,000 votes in 2018. What's the spread that we're looking at right now?
Michels is up about 21% right now. Walker won it by 35% in 2018. He won it by 46% in 2014. So clearly, Michels isn't hitting the numbers he needs. He needed about 63 on his targeting map, and he's at about 59 right now.
Can you overcome that?
It's tough. He's got to get a big number in Brown County, which is not in. Only about 2% of Brown County's in. So he's going to need Brown County to be overwhelmingly in his favor.
This has been fascinating to watch all of these numbers come in. We are, of course, going to stay here and watch them for you. We hope you will stay with us. Our news at 10 o'clock is going to start in just a few seconds, and the team is assembling right now. We will see you soon.
Wisconsin's voters have spoken. The votes are being counted. Wisconsin and the nation now wait to see who emerges victorious, challenger, or incumbent. Our NBC 15 News team is standing by around the state to bring you results and reaction. A special election night edition of NBC 15 News. The battle in the battleground starts now.
Good evening. All eyes on the Badger State tonight, where the race for governor and U.S. Senate up for grabs, and we've got a barn burner for you that we're following tonight. I'm John Stofflet.
And I'm Maria Lizignoli. We are keeping you updated on these important races with team coverage from Madison, Milwaukee, and Neenah, as well as covering many statewide races, including Attorney General, Secretary of State, and District 2's congressional seat.
Plus some local races, which include the Dane County Sheriff.
And we are following the race for governor.
Let's look at the latest numbers there. A lot of eyes on that. And with an estimated 65% of the vote total in, Governor Evers, the incumbent, with a lead of 3% over his challenger, Tim Michels. So this one was a dead heat in the last Marquette poll, but the incumbent, Governor Evers, holding a lead right now with just about 2/3 of the vote in here. So we will keep watching this. If we get any new numbers, of course, we will get them to you as soon as we have them. So let's begin our team coverage with the Evers campaign.
That's where our Elizabeth Wattis is downtown tonight in Madison, where his supporters are gathering at the Orpheum Theater. Hi, Elizabeth.
Yeah, John and Maria, I just got done talking and checking in with the campaign of Tony Evers, and one of his campaign managers told me that they are expecting here within the next 20 minutes that Milwaukee County's absentee ballots will be counted, and they're really looking forward to that. As they say, those absentee typically tend to go blue. I was also talking with that campaign manager about the strategy of Governor Tony Evers throughout this race. They did a trivia of Governor Tony Evers on that screen behind me not too long ago, and they said they really wanted to focus on social media, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, to try to show young people that the Governor Tony Evers is relatable to them. You could see that even today, up till the polls closing, we saw the governor going on campus at UW, going downtown, talking with young voters here. So I talked with a young voter here and asked why they support Governor Tony Evers, and what they pointed to is rights for the LGBTQ plus community. I also talked with the owner of the Minocqua Brewing Company, who is supporting Evers here. He actually made a beer in support of the governor tonight. So the energy here is really fun, it's really exciting, and people are definitely happy with these votes coming in. But still, of course, a lot of votes need to be counted. A lot needs to be done. But for now, live in Madison, Elizabeth Wattis, NBC 15 News.
All right, you heard Elizabeth mention the absentee ballots in Milwaukee. That'll be around 60,000 ballots that will be counted. Those would tend to skew Democratic if history holds up here. Thank you, Elizabeth. Also, of course, in Milwaukee, Tim Michael's campaign.
And his supporters gathering in Milwaukee. So let's go to NBC 15's Michelle Beck live at the Michaels event in.
Hi, John and Maria. I'm sure you have heard throughout the night the different campaigns, Elizabeth, Colton, Tyler, all saying they've heard cheers at their campaign watch parties. But just minutes ago, here at the Tim Michaels party in Milwaukee at the Italian Community Center, we heard the very first cheer for the very first time tonight. And, you know, if you look over to my left and my right, there are TV monitors, people hovered around them. They were cheering because they saw the numbers come in for Ron Johnson. And so it's not just a party for Tim Michaels, it's also a gathering of Republicans. And if you go to these Republican rallies, I went to one for Ron Johnson in Janesville yesterday, you know, Tim Michaels' name would come up too. And so the speakers, you would hear the Republican leaders and speakers say, don't just vote Ron Johnson, don't just vote Tim Michaels, vote red down the entire ballot. And earlier today, you may have remembered me mentioning the campaign spokesperson said, you know, these crowds, they have an appetite for an outsider. And the more supporters that I speak to, the more I realize that really is true. People are wanting someone who hasn't had prior experience in politics before. For now, live in Milwaukee, I'm Michelle Beck.
The other big race we are watching here, and look at that, dead heat, 50-50 with 2/3 of the vote in the U.S. Senate race. So the incumbent is Ron Johnson, and the challenger, Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. Johnson hoping to get a third term here, and he's got a race on his hands here as those two are deadlocked with 2/3 of the vote in. So it'll be interesting to see when the Milwaukee absentee votes come in, how that's affected, and when we hear from some of the more rural counties as they come in. So let's go to NBC 15's Colt Molesky, who's in the Fox Valley. He's with the Ron Johnson campaign tonight. Colt.
The Michaels election party, that's not the only place they're cheering for those election results in the U.S. Senate race. There's been a couple big cheers when they've shown the results so far in that race. Big cheers for Ron Johnson. And I was actually able to talk with Senator Ron Johnson's team. They have the latest from the War Room saying that they are cautiously optimistic. That's the phrasing that they used. They said that they're expecting most of the votes from Dane and Milwaukee counties have already been in and counted, and now they're waiting on some rural counties across Wisconsin to really lift them throughout the rest of the night. So, like I said, they are cautiously optimistic going into the remainder of the night here as those election results continue to roll in across the state of Wisconsin. In Nina, Colt Molesky, NBC 15 News.
And meanwhile, supporters for Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes gathering tonight in Milwaukee. And that's where we find NBC 15's Tyler Peters joining us live.
Yeah, the energy here at the Turner Hall Ballroom has escalated over the last hour or so. Supporters continuing to see these results on the TVs as they show them. Now, it looks like Ron Johnson has taken a slight lead over Mandela Barnes, but it is a deadlock, as John just said moments ago. And I just spoke with a campaign strategist for the Democratic Party here in Wisconsin who told me that this race is coming down to a razor's edge, and that's something that we expected going into this. As the Marquette Law polls show from last week, Barnes was trailing Johnson by a couple percentage points, but was within that margin of error. But the energy is really strong here, despite that unease of where this race will go as we head into the later stages of the night. Now, a couple of things that I talked with supporters, I asked them, why did you vote for Mandela Barnes? And they told me, we are really passionate for what he stands for. We really like that he stands for all Wisconsinites. And that's particularly interesting because in a Marquette Law poll in September, abortion was one of the topics that was on that poll, and 68% of Wisconsinites believe it should be legal in all or most cases. So right there is a prime example of what exactly that supporter meant when she says Mandela Barnes stands for all Wisconsinites. Now, that is just 68%. That's not all Wisconsinites, but that just shows that's something that Barnes and his campaign staff have leaned on going into the last couple weeks leading up to election night here tonight. Abortion has been one of the key topics, and women's rights as well. Reporting live in Milwaukee, I'm Tyler Peters.
Tyler, thanks. Let's look at the U.S. House District, Congress District 2 here in the Madison area. This is not a surprise. Mark Pocan heavily favored there. The Democrat will be going back for another term. Eric Olson, an attorney in Madison, coming up with 26% of the vote. Mark Pocan will be going back to Congress with a significant win there. And we want to monitor these important races by getting perspective on those numbers so far.
And Arlene Mills joining us now with a special edition of Election Night Unspun.
And I want to introduce our analysts. For those of you just joining us, not on our digital platforms earlier, you should have been, so do it next time. We have Bill McCoshen, partner at Michael Best Strategies, and Mike Brown, deputy director of A Better Wisconsin. Together, they've been with us all night and will be as we continue to monitor these results. Second congressional district, not a surprise. I'm looking at the third here, which was Ron Kind's seat, and it looks like the Republican has about a 5,000 vote margin. Anything that you want to point out as we talk about Mark Pocan's seat and kind of look at our 8 congressional districts here in Wisconsin?
Well, I mean, I think the third CD was always a tough hold for Democrats. A lot of the district has been trending away from them, a lot of the more rural areas. I think you saw some good turnout in La Crosse County and city of La Crosse. Some good turnout on the campuses, Eau Claire and Stevens Point. We'll see whether or not that's enough to pull a Democrat through.
The maps got a little bit better, and they were drawn by Tony Evers for the congressional district. And Donald Trump has won this district twice. Derek Van Orden barely lost it 2 years ago to Ron Kind. He was expected to win tonight, particularly because Democrats pulled the money out from under Brad Pfaff several weeks ago. So I'm not surprised that Derek Van Orden is winning, and the expectation is he will win tonight.
And that would be a seat that would flip for Republicans in Congress.
Right.
Here's what's really interesting. We're watching these 2 statewide races, the gubernatorial race and for U.S. Senate, and we see what looks to me like a split ticket.
Splitters.
What is happening?
We haven't had ticket splitters in Wisconsin since 1998, and appears they're back tonight. They're supporting Ron Johnson and Tony Evers at this point in time. Johnson's slightly ahead of Mandela Barnes. Evers has a decent or comfortable lead on Tim Michels at this point. Again, we haven't seen this in 24 years in Wisconsin.
What would you attribute to Evers' success when Johnson is also doing well?
It's tough to say. I think there does appear to be a little bit of ticket splitting around the margins, although I will say, again, the U.S. Senate race looked like it was going to be close this whole time. It is turning out to be quite close. I think there was maybe a little bit of a difference in the campaigns in that Lieutenant Governor Barnes, had a little bit of catch up to do coming out of the primary. Some of the allies of Senator Johnson, he had some well-funded PACs and other special interest spending on his behalf early, which, put the Barnes campaign a little bit on the defensive, although I think they've closed very strong and have brought this race back to pretty much dead even.
We seem to be bucking the national trend. Republicans have done well from coast to coast, probably have the control of the House already tonight, likely to get the Senate a little bit later, maybe later this week. But here in Wisconsin, we have at least one statewide Democrat doing fairly well.
Is it abortion? Is it education? We're kind of out of time, but what is it? You don't know?
You know, I think it's hard to tell. If campus turnout is what Mike thinks it may have been, abortion could have been an issue there.
Okay, we'll continue to monitor the results for you, and we will see you shortly.
30 minutes ago, almost 2 hours after the polls closed, 90 people were still in line waiting to vote in the town of Middleton.
And this speaks to that turnout in Dane County that our analysts are referring there to, the huge turnout. NBC 15's Marcus Arsvold spoke to election workers and voters at their polling place as they had to brave some chilly temps.
A little town of Middleton update. They had a very busy line earlier this evening, and it's gone down a little bit, but we've still got a line. The clerk's office says 2,231 votes have been counted so far, and that's including about 350 absentees with about 5,000 total registered voters. Now, I talked to the last person who was in line who said she had been waiting about an hour and a half, but she says it's worth it even to brave the cold just to make sure that her voice and her vote is counted. For now, in the town of Middleton, Marcus Arsvold, NBC 15 News.
Early projections from the Dane County Clerk's Office estimated voter turnout could be at an unprecedented level, 85%. That's an estimate based on the fact that by 11 this morning, the city of Madison had more than 47,000 ballots counted, or about 27% of registered voters. Now, we've asked, but have not yet received updated numbers from the clerk's office, but we are staying on this.
And we're hearing a lot of stories about people who were determined to stay in line, sometimes for hours. Dane County Sheriff's race, 77% of the estimated vote total in, and Calvin Barrett, who is the incumbent that Governor Evers appointed, will apparently, it looks like, have a good shot there at returning, holding that office as Dane County Sheriff. Calvin Barrett was 76% of the vote. Anthony Hamilton, who works for him in his department there, significantly trailing there by a 76 to 24%. So those numbers are pretty telling there. And we're also following the race for Dane County Sheriff, but also Iowa County Sheriff. NBC 15's Cameron Kelly, though, let's get back to Dane County. She's been following that race for us.
I have been in contact with both candidates, John. Things to know about incumbent Calvin Barrett. If elected, he says he wants to try to rebuild fractured relationships in the community. Barrett says he would like to be more accountable and be more transparent. Candidate Anthony Hamilton says modern law enforcement must be able to adapt rapidly to changing crime patterns, the law, and current events. Our very own Elizabeth Wattis was able to talk to Barrett tonight, who is currently a part of incumbent Governor Tony Evers' watch party.
If things continue to go as they have been going, and I am elected, my top priority, number one, is community safety and community engagement. Number two, I want to continue to enhance our jail diversion program.
As for Hamilton, he tells me that he's excited for these results to roll in as they are in that you see. He's currently spending time with his family and friends right now. Live in the newsroom, Cameron Kelly, NBC 15 News.
So Barrett looks to be on his way to winning his first election, having been appointed by the governor when Sheriff Dave Mahoney retired. Let's go back to Iowa County Sheriff, as I just alluded to a little bit earlier there. 55 to 45%, a 10% margin for Michael Peterson, who is the Republican there. Kim Allen, Michael Peterson there. Allen has 16 years of experience in law enforcement, the past 11 in the Madison Police Department. And Peterson, who's ahead there, holds 18 years working for the Iowa County Corrections and Emergency Dispatch. Let's look at some other races. Another statewide race we're following closely, only a 2% margin with just about 25% of the vote in. The incumbent, Josh Call, looking for another term. His challenger, Eric Toney, who's been the Fond du Lac County District Attorney for a decade, just 2 points behind, 2 percentage points behind there in that race, and a lot of votes yet to be counted there. How about Wisconsin Secretary of State? A whole kind of drama behind the scenes going on there as Doug LaFollette, 82 years old, been in that office for about 4 decades, holding on to it, hopefully in his eyes, because he wants to make sure Republicans who would like to see Amy Loudon back in there do not take control of that office where they might give power to certify elections back to that office. I don't think I have to tell you there is a lot of drama around election certification ever since the last couple of presidential elections. So Doug La Follette is ahead right now, but again, 25% of the vote, estimated vote in there, 49 to 47%. And state treasurer numbers now, another statewide office. Aaron Richardson and John Leiber are tied, 49% each. Richardson, a Fitchburg mayor, and John Leiber, an attorney. So we'll keep an eye on that. Again, 25% of the vote in there, a dead heat.
As we follow the governor's race and the race for U.S. Senate, I want to point out the 8 counties that we're looking at, and I want to get your guys' take on the margins that we're seeing. So all the counties, 72 here, these are the 8 that we're looking at that Mike and Bill know there are specific margins that add up to success for these candidates. Dane in Milwaukee County, obviously for the Democrats, and then we've got the WOW I'm going to point out first. So those are right around Milwaukee County is this far over here. You can see those center around that, and then the BOW is up in the Fox Valley. Those were a little slower to come in. I've got to ask you, though, when we go back, let's just talk about first Milwaukee and Dane. It looks like Dane is overperforming. Milwaukee, not yet, but we're talking about a lot of ballots that still have to be counted, Mike.
Right. I think the governor is doing very well in Dane County, outperforming his margins in 2018, which is a very good sign.
Yep, I'm going to bring those up.
I think when you look at when you look at Milwaukee, there are a good number of votes that still have not been reported, but those are largely early and absentee votes, which you would expect would largely favor the governor. So in those 2 critical counties, he seems to be doing pretty well. He also seems to be overperforming the numbers from 2018 in Waukesha County, which is another large center of votes for Democrats.
And I just looked a minute ago, Bill, and it looked to me like Michaels is underperforming in all 3 of these.
Yeah, Michaels needed 63% in Waukesha County. He's getting 59% right now. In Washington County, he needed 72. He's at 68. Ozaki, he's about where he needs to be. We don't have anything from Brown yet. He's going to need a big number there to try and get back in this race. But the reality is the Evers team did a spectacular job both in Dane County, Lee, and in Milwaukee County in turning out their voters. You need message, organization, and money to win a statewide race. Democrats did a far better job in the organization part than Republicans did.
Mike, Bill, appreciate it. We'll see you in just a few minutes. We'll see you right after this break.
It was great. It was great, but I
And now, your first alert forecast from NBC 15.
Well, fortunately, we had a great election day of weather. It doesn't get much nicer than what we had out there today. Big changes, though, as we round out the week. We'll have near record temperatures the next 2 days, and then a strong fall cold front moves through Thursday p.m., I think late afternoon into the evening. Promises to bring a line of showers and storms. That's what we do know. Here's what we have to kind of figure out in the next 24, 36 hours. The strength of that line of storms and the overall severe potential, because there is going to be the chance of some strong to severe storms. I think a much better chance through southern Minnesota, central Iowa, down into Missouri. That will be weakening as it moves into Wisconsin, but we do have a level 1 risk west of Madison for an isolated strong or severe storm. We'll keep an eye on the data. Should this look more likely, we may need to consider a first alert day with the new data coming in tomorrow. So stay tuned. We'll have the very latest on that. Right now, though, 42 degrees. Live look downtown. It's a calm, cool evening. Winds are light out of the east and southeast. I think we're pretty much at our lows for the night. We'll hold steady here, and then with the southerly winds, we should actually start to climb to around the 50-degree mark by early tomorrow morning. Rain tonight will stay to our north, with the exception of maybe far northern in Juneau and Adams County. You may get a couple of raindrops. Small chance of a shower as we head through the day on Wednesday. I think we're clear tomorrow night. Much better chance of those storms as we head into Thursday afternoon and evening after record highs into the 70s. Here will be that line of storms that could bring us the severe potential. 40s tonight, climbing to near 50 by the morning. 63 tomorrow. 7-day forecast. Record highs Thursday into the 70s, and we fall to the 30s starting on Friday. That's a look at your first alert forecast. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
We are back with more election coverage. You can follow all the races in the area, the numbers at the bottom of your screen. But let's look in Dane County, where voters found 3 referenda questions, and now these are not acted upon. These are advisory referenda. They're for research so that the legislators and lawmakers can take a look at what you think. And apparently in Dane County, by a wide margin, the voters here believe marijuana should be legalized, taxed, and regulated the same way that alcohol is for adults 21 years of age or older. Again, an advisory referendum. Question 2, should all the records of previous convictions for marijuana possession in small amounts in the state of Wisconsin be expunged? And that is also by a similar margin, 82 to 18%. Again, advisory. And on the issue of abortion, this number in Dane County, probably not surprising to most, 85% to 15%. Should that Wisconsin statute, which bans abortions in most cases, be repealed. And that number there, 85 to 15%. So again, just advisory referenda that the area lawmakers and legislators, supervisors, et cetera, will look at. All right, let's get to one of the 2 big races we're covering statewide, the gubernatorial race. We're now up to 73% in, and it is looking like a good night for Tony Evers, who is ahead here by 3 points, the incumbent, with 73% of the vote in. And as far as I know, we still have not heard from the Milwaukee County absentee ballots, which could be 60, 70,000 votes, which would tend to skew blue. So 51 to 48% there. Okay, we're continuing our election team coverage now with those covering the gubernatorial campaigns, Michaels and Evers. Let's head to NBC 15's Michelle Beck, who is live in Milwaukee at the Michaels Watch Party.
You know, John, you were just talking about referenda, and it's interesting because the campaign spokesperson here at the Republican challenger, Tim Michaels' campaign, she says that this election is a referendum on Tony Evers. And so even though tonight is all about Tim Michaels here in Milwaukee, Tony Evers, that name is really unescapable. I mean, even look at the way the last campaign stop of the Michaels campaign, the spokesperson did tell me it was in Kenosha, and that was meant to be symbolic, she says. Of course, she's pointing to what happened 2 years ago in the aftermath of the Jacob Blake shooting. That was in Kenosha there. And the Michaels campaign has been really critical of the way Evers handled that. So even with the supporters, they're all talking about Tony Evers and the need for Tim Michaels to beat him. In Milwaukee, I'm Michelle Beck.
Michelle, thank you. We are also with the Tony Evers campaign tonight, whose supporters have gathered in downtown Madison at the Orpheum Theater. NBC 15's Elizabeth Wattis joins us there live.
Yeah, John and Maria, those polls that you just read reflecting the energy in here at the Evers camp. People are energized, they're excited, they're loving seeing these numbers come in, knowing that the absentee ballots in Milwaukee County have not yet been counted. I just talked with the campaign manager with the Evers campaign. I asked him if the governor was en route to come here to the Orpheum Theater. He has not been here yet, and he said no, not yet. Hold your horses. The governor is still relaxing with his family, watching as these results run in. And I was just talking about the push for the Evers campaign to really take on social media to attract those young voters. So I just went on the governor's Instagram page. His last message said, folks, here's what I believe in: voting rights, democracy, reproductive rights, and public education. His main platforms he is hoping people agree with him on tonight. Reporting live in Madison, Elizabeth Wattis, NBC 15 News.
Okay, Bill and Mike, I want to get your take on this governor's race. At this point, we're looking at, and you heard Elizabeth just saying that nobody's ready to take to the podium at this point, but we're looking at about a 47,000 vote spread. At what point, knowing Milwaukee County still has to come in, is this insurmountable?
Milwaukee County should be in by 11 o'clock. That's what the clerk, George Christensen, has said, and I think after that it'll be all over probably.
I think the path is getting very narrow for the Michaels campaign. After those Milwaukee County numbers come in, there just aren't enough votes in the rest of the state to make up for those margins in Dane County and Milwaukee County, and missing targets in some other key counties.
I want you to explain the other person's success here. Why do you think that Johnson is doing well, and Barnes is not, but then you see the reverse in the governor's race?
Well, I think there's quite a few votes to count before we're ready to call that Senate race.
Yeah.
But I think, it's probably the same reason for both campaigns, in that, Senator Johnson and Governor Evers were both very aggressive coming out of the primary in defining their opponent early. Yeah. And it was a tough climb back. I think, we saw the Barnes campaign really closing in the last couple weeks here. And it seems that, you know, the Michaels campaign maybe isn't going to be able to close that gap.
And what about for you on the flip side?
Incumbency helps both of them, both Evers and Johnson's, no question about that. And I think Evers did a pretty good job of defining Michaels, particularly in the Dane County DMA over the course of the last 6 weeks. And Michaels didn't have a response to that.
And we're still waiting to see some of those Fox Valley numbers, although they are coming in better. Is there anything specifically that's jumping out to you on those two races?
Well, I just think the delta between Johnson and Michaels is really the story tonight. Is Michaels has underperformed Johnson in several key counties, and you know those are counties he had to have.
I think it looks like the U.S. Senate race, however it turns out, is going to be much closer than the gubernatorial race.
No question.
We won't call anything
For the
just
first
yet,
time in
will we?
history, they'll both be within 3%.
Wow. All right. I look forward to seeing those final numbers. John?
Well, let's look at where they stand right now with just under 3/4 of the estimated vote total in. The governor, Tony Evers, at 51%, Michaels 48%, as they talked about. All right, and let's go to the race for U.S. Senate. Now, Ron Johnson has taken that 2% lead, but there are a lot of votes to count yet, so we'll be keeping a close eye on that. All right, our streaming coverage continues with more live reports and expert analysis.
Our streaming coverage continues with more live reports and expert analysis. And right now, our digital anchor, Vanessa Reza, will take over the stream. She joins us live for now from our newsroom, where she's been gathering new information to share with all of you.
Thank you so much, John and Maria. As you just mentioned, I'm here live in our newsroom from our digital news desk. So for those of you who are just joining us, if you see me reaching or looking off to the side here, that's because I'm operating this desk all live here. Now, we have had a few guests here join us tonight to give us some analysis on these election results as they come in. And I do want to go ahead and bring back one of them, our Gray DC News Bureau reporter, Brendan Cullerton, is joining us here tonight, and he's going to give us some of his thoughts. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pot him up here. Brendan, we just talked about it with our other analysis that we've seen some ticket splitting around the margins with Evers and Johnson ahead. What do you make of that?
Yeah, Vanessa, I think that's far and away, as you know, I deal with some audio issues here. That's far and away the biggest surprise in Wisconsin today is how many voters went both for Evers and for Ron Johnson. That's something that people didn't expect to happen. That's something that I predict there's going to be a lot of, you know, analysis in the coming days as to why that happened. Now, that gap is narrowing a little bit, and you're going to see a few different kind of waves and moves as more northern results in the state come in, and then as we wait for the central count votes, particularly in Milwaukee, where about 2/3 of the vote has been counted so far. So, you know, there's still some of this race left, but as you mentioned, the biggest surprise is just how many voters in what was not really expected went for Evers and Ron Johnson.
Thanks, Brendan. Do you think that Governor Tony Evers and Senator Ron Johnson being the incumbent candidates has helped them tonight?
Well, obviously being an incumbent is always an advantage. And that could be part of it. You know, maybe they just had more political infrastructure in place than the challengers. But it is surprising because they don't necessarily run on very different platforms. One thing that could be different as far as statewide races is the state's 1800s abortion law. And now that's probably more of an impact in the Attorney General's race because Michael said he wouldn't enforce it, but, you know, maybe some of the messaging from Democrats came across to voters, and some voters wanted their access to abortion rights protected in the state. That could be one possible explanation for it. Other than that, you got me beat. I don't really know right now why there would be so much split ticket voting in the state. And that's something that, you know, as I mentioned, people are going to be kind of looking into in the next coming weeks.
Thanks, Brendan. And for these races, what are some things that you have your eye on for those who are down? So for Lieutenant Governor Barnes and for Tim Michels, do you see a pathway for them right now, and what would that be for them to end up victorious tonight?
So for Barnes, it's a lot simpler. Basically, by the end of the count of the North Woods, Republicans need to be up because the last votes that are counted in Wisconsin always come from Milwaukee, and it's because they have what's known as a central count, where they bring all of the votes into one area and count them. And there's a somewhat unique state law in Wisconsin where you're not allowed to count the votes that were mailed in or absentee ballot until Election Day itself. And if you remember back in the presidential race, this was something that Donald Trump pointed out when he said that there might be something fishy in the state. It's not fishy. It's something Republicans have known for years. They have to kind of build up a lead. So for Mandela Barnes, the path is to maintain a tight race throughout the night until those votes from Milwaukee come in. Tim Michels, it doesn't look as good for him right now because he's down and he needs to, in those remaining kind of rural counties, build up enough of a lead to withstand that late sort of Milwaukee charge. So that would be the path for those two candidates. And right now, it looks like Barnes would have the easier path to come back than Tim Michels.
Thank you, Brendan. I want to talk a little bit about Milwaukee. I do know that you spent some time there as a reporter for the Milwaukee area. What can you speak to in terms of the timing for counting all of these votes? We saw there our other NBC 15 analysts mentioned that they think that they should have those counted by 11. By then, it could be all over for some of these candidates. So can you draw on some of your experience reporting in that area, and what can we expect to see tonight from Milwaukee specifically?
Well, at last check, and I don't have numbers in front of me, so if you're in front of a computer, you would have better knowledge there than me. But at last check, it was about 2/3 of the way in, and Evers was running at about 2/3 of that vote. So that's a pretty substantial size, a pretty substantial chunk of the Milwaukee vote that's still to come in. I don't off the top of my head know when they'll have that counted by. I can't give that information for you, and it kind of depends on the individual precincts around the county. We're talking about volunteers and how fast they get ballots from point A to point B, so it's difficult to put sort of an exact time on it, but that's what we're looking for kind of as this race progresses. You talk about, you know, if drawing from experience, I did talk to current Congressman Scott Fitzgerald during the presidential race, and he pointed out we need to build up a big lead going into that final Milwaukee count. So this is something the candidates know about. A lot of political insiders in Wisconsin know about. It catches some people off guard because it seems unusual that, you know, the mail-in ballots would be coming in last. And Milwaukee votes would be coming in last as the bigger city. But that is the way it works, and that's really what's going to shape this race as it comes down to it.
Thanks, Brendan. And I do want to bring up those numbers because I do have them. Right now for Milwaukee County, there's an estimated 67% of votes counted, with Tony Evers up at 67.2% and Tim Michels at 31.9%. So there's some numbers there to provide a little bit more context. You're talking a lot about candidates gaining specific areas. Can you elaborate a bit more on or just provide some more analysis on voter demographics and how these shift in Wisconsin?
Well, I think one of the interesting things about Wisconsin is it's not quite as much about finding a demographic and trying to convince them of your message. People's views in Wisconsin have been pretty much set for several years. It's one of the most polarized states in the country, and there's not like a large group of independent voters to win over. So when you talk about campaign strategy in Milwaukee, it's more about the phrase getting out the vote than trying to convince people of your message. The key is really to find your base and give them what you're doing that will make them want to get out to the polls. And sometimes it's not what you're doing, it's look at the other guy, look what he's doing and how much you don't like that, and trying to convince voters that they need to vote against something. But it's really kind of getting that passion for getting your team to the polls and not trying to make your team bigger.
And I'm glad you brought that up. I do want to touch on the polarization a bit and the conversation surrounding the Republican Party of this old versus new guard of the GOP. Do you think it's Trump's party now, or what, if any, impact has Trump's presidency had on Republicans in Wisconsin?
Well, I think the impact Trump has had on Wisconsin is clear as day, because kind of what used to be the norm in Wisconsin is Republicans would dominate the Milwaukee suburbs. They'd win 90% of the vote. They'd lose Milwaukee, they'd lose Dane County, and they'd have a pretty good edge in the rural states. Since Donald Trump, they've had a dominant edge in the rural states, and not quite as much of that edge. They're still, winning these suburban Milwaukee counties comfortably, but not as comfortably as Scott Walker used to win them. So the demographic of the Republican voter in Wisconsin appears to have changed, much like it has in other areas of the country. And I think you'll see whether or not Republican candidates can win this election if they're going to need to, come up with some new strategy or not.
Thanks, Brendan. Let's zoom out a bit to the bigger picture here. How is Wisconsin's election shaping up, and what's going on across the country? Obviously, Wisconsin has a lot of eyes on it tonight as a battleground state, but we do know that it's not the only one.
Right, it's not the only one, but what I've been telling other states as well is every seat counts the same. So, I just spoke to some people in Alabama. That was not a close Senate race, but it counts just as much as what a Ron Johnson or a Mandela Barnes would do for Republicans or Democrats, respectively. So that's really the Wisconsin's role in the national picture, is Republicans need just one seat to take control of the Senate. If that's Ron Johnson's seat, if they lose Ron Johnson's seat, that's one more that they're going to have to pick up. So that's why there's been so much money from outside parties spent in Wisconsin. That's why there's so much national attention spent in Wisconsin. Ron Johnson actually is the only Republican incumbent in a state that Joe Biden won. So that's been a big national target for Democrats. But it does matter just as much as other states, but it's viewed as being very much in play, which is why it's getting so much attention in a race that's really it could come down to one seat. This could be the seat.
Thanks, Brendan. I would just want to give some updated numbers here. Right now, for the race for governor, we have 76% of votes counted, with Tony Evers still up at 50.8%. And in the race for that U.S. Senate seat right now, 76% of estimated votes in, and that as well has Ron Johnson, the same as we mentioned earlier, up at 51%. So those are some updated numbers there. Obviously right now, Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes is down. But if he were to be up, we know that he would have been the first black senator from our state. Now, do you think he has faced some criticism as of late that he was too liberal to win in the state? What do you make of that, and do you think that his campaigning has had an impact on whether or not he was able to attain some of those swing votes?
Well, I'll start by saying I don't think the fact that, or the accusation that he's too liberal to win in the state is all that accurate, because look at Tammy Baldwin. One of the best things I've heard to represent Wisconsin politics is look at the two senators. You've got Ron Johnson, you've got Tammy Baldwin. they couldn't be more different. And that's kind of what I'm getting at when I say, it's not really about, convincing people. It's about getting your team out to vote. So I think there is a place in Wisconsin for a very liberal candidate. I think one of the campaign tactics that has worked for Ron Johnson against Mandela Barnes is crime. He was, for limiting cash bail, and he was attached to the Tony Evers administration that saw things go horribly wrong in Kenosha a few years ago. The other thing, though, is that's not really impacting Evers, it would seem, in this race. So, off the top of my head, I can't tell you why Evers is outperforming Barnes. That's why I think it's so interesting.
Let's talk about day of campaigning. Obviously, we've seen these candidates go out and vote today. But what do you make of, for example, Barnes heading out to UW-Milwaukee today to tell people, specifically his supporters, to get out there and cast their vote?
Well, I mean, Barnes is a Milwaukee guy. He was a state rep from Milwaukee. He's from Milwaukee, so that makes sense to me. Milwaukee is his biggest base. He's, as far as the Tony Evers administration, he's the biggest connection to Milwaukee. So, it would make sense to me that he would hold a lot of his events in Milwaukee. It's kind of his bread and butter as far as his base and, where he's from.
I know we've also seen candidates, visit Wisconsin in these past few months as we led up to this midterm election. But notably, Biden did not visit. What do you make of that?
Biden not visiting, I think, is probably good for Democrats because Biden is unpopular. And if you remember, Barnes didn't go to a Biden event the last time he was in Wisconsin. And he came up with a reason that he told the media, but I think you can read between the lines. When the president comes and he's of your party, you're normally there. The fact that he didn't go probably signals that he doesn't think that Joe Biden helps his chances. So, reading the tea leaves there, that would probably be my analysis on that, is that they don't believe that Biden would help them.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your insight tonight, Brendan. It's certainly appreciated. I will go ahead and send it back now to the studio with John and Maria, who have updates from our crews following these campaigns. Thank you.
Welcome back. We are following this big race very closely. The U.S. Senate race in Wisconsin, it was supposed to be a 2-point margin between the incumbent, Ron Johnson, and his challenger, Mandela Barnes. That's what it is right now, but there's only 77% of the vote in. We're still waiting to hear from areas of the state. So right there, about a 48,000 vote margin for Ron Johnson. Very, very close. The incumbent wanting to come back for that third term, and Mandela Barnes wanting to unseat him. People around the country watching this race, as they are all these Senate races that are up, to see what the margins will look like in the U.S. Senate for Democrats and Republicans. So we'll continue to follow this.
All right, we have reporters at both candidates' election events tonight. Let's first go to NBC 15's Colton Molesky with the latest from the Johnson campaign in Neenah. Hi, Colton.
I was speaking with Senator Ron Johnson's campaign team, and they say the word from the war room is that they are not concerned about absentee ballots. I was asked them if there was any concern about those absentee ballots swinging things late in the election process, and they said they weren't concerned about that. They believe that a wave of rural counties will help with the election and with those votes rolling in over the next few hours. And so they're depending on those counties to show up. They said that they anticipate high voter turnout from those counties. That's the word from their war room. They also told me that they were anticipating low voter turnout in Dane and Milwaukee counties. And so those are a couple of the factors that they were banking on and looking at as they were looking at this statewide race. They told me earlier today that they were very happy with how they finished the campaign trail going into Election Day. They said that they felt like they had a strong finish with a 60-stop bus tour across the state of Wisconsin leading to today. And now it's been a festive atmosphere all day long here, especially with all of these guests cheering every time they have an update on that race going up on the TVs right here in the ballroom. In Neenah, Colt Molesky, NBC 15 News.
All right, let's go over to Milwaukee, where Mandela Barnes is hosting his campaign event. We have NBC 15's Tyler Peters joining us there live.
Well, it certainly seems that the energy in this room has hit a little bit of a lull as of late. Obviously, the race looking right now, Johnson with a couple of percentage point lead over Mandela Barnes as it stands. And I just spoke with one of their campaign staff members who tells me he has no update on what time Barnes will arrive to the venue. And he also said that he doesn't really have an update on when this race will be called. I asked him, will it be within the next 30 minutes, within the next hour, within the next couple hours? He said he just didn't have an answer for me. So that's the latest that I've got here from their campaign team. Reporting in Milwaukee, Tyler Peters.
Okay, and our analysts are here now. We are closely monitoring this. Since we just heard about the Senate race, this could be even closer than what we saw when we were talking about less than 1 percentage point. Is that what you think is going to happen here?
Well, it's possible. Once the Milwaukee votes get added to the total, that's going to shrink the margin for Johnson. Johnson will still be in the lead, but not by much.
I think it's looking like it's going to be a very, very close race.
Wow.
Which is, significantly different from what a lot of people had been saying just a few weeks ago.
And for what all the polls said, too.
Credit to the Barnes campaign for closing strong here.
Okay, I want to let's bring up those margins again for everybody so they can see as we talk about the governor's race. Have you guys taken a look at the WOW and BOW counties? And over here, does it still hold that Evers is outperforming here and Michaels is underperforming, or have you seen anything shift in the last 30 minutes?
No, it looks like Evers is overperforming in Dane and Milwaukee, which were already going to be strongholds for him, and Michaels is underperforming at least Johnson and probably his own targets in the WOW and the BOW counties.
I think that makes it look like it's a very, very difficult situation for the Michaels campaign.
Yeah.
They're just at the point where they're starting to run out of places where they can get enough votes to overcome these margins.
Do you expect that we will hear from their campaign shortly, Bill? At what point do you make that call?
I think you want to do the right thing when there's clearly no path left, and I think Mike's right. That path is pretty narrow at this point in time. My guess is they'll wait till the Milwaukee dump is finally done, which should be in the next 5 to 10 minutes, and then there'll probably be a call coming to Governor Evers.
Let's take a look at some of the other down ballot races. I mean, another statewide is for AG. I'm trying to scroll down here to see what the latest numbers are. So the incumbent Call, he has a pretty significant lead there, but there's only 54% of the estimated vote in. Can you guys explain, too, for people why that estimated number is higher in some of the races than others?
I think this is just as municipalities are reporting their numbers to the counties. We're getting those numbers at the top of the ticket first, and those numbers farther down, the other races are just a little slower to come in.
Do you expect Call to hold this one?
This race has tracked with the governor's race since 2010. So if Evers is on course to win tonight, the likelihood is Call probably is reelected too.
I think that's definitely what we saw in 2018. The Call campaign ran just a little behind the Evers campaign, but they did track quite closely together.
Another statewide Secretary of State Doug LaFollette in the lead. Again, though, only 53% of the estimated vote in. House districts 4, 5, 6 have all been called. 1 and 3 are still out. So let's just talk about the style race here. He is leading by, it looks to me, like 24,000 or so votes. Would you assume he would hold the first CD?
Yeah, depending on what's in. I haven't looked super close at that one. That's a big number to overcome at 11 o'clock at night. I would imagine Brian Stiles is going to be reelected.
I would think that one looks like it's trending the Republicans' way.
What about 3? This is Ron Kind's seat. He was a Democrat, the dean of the congressional delegation. There were only 3 Democrats out of our 8. Republicans trying to flip this, and Van Orden is ahead by 7,000. What's your read on that at this point?
So the places to watch on this one are Eau Claire and La Crosse. If you're on the PAF team, that's where he could roll up some decent numbers. He's not going to get it in the rural area. Derek Van Orden's going to win the rural areas by a big margin. But it looks like Van Orden's in a position to flip that seat tonight.
Yeah, I think, Derek Van Orden is a candidate who is pretty far out of the mainstream, but that district has been trending Republican, and we'll see if those areas that Bill mentioned, kind of the more urban areas of the district, provide margins that are large enough for PAF to squeak out a victory.
In 15 seconds, is there a state Senate seat that you want to point out real quick?
Well, we know Romaine Quinn won in the 25th, so if Republicans hold everything they have, they will have a veto-proof majority.
That would be the one that they flipped.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us on Digital. We'll be right back.
This is an NBC 15 News Decision 2022 update. The battle in the battleground.
We told you it was going to be a busy day at the polls, and matter of fact, in just the last 15 minutes or so, the final voter voted in the poll out here in the town of Middleton and locations of Dane County. People were in line for hours. That's how busy it was.
2 hours
Crazy.
after the polls closed. Tonight, we are waiting for the results from all of the races, but particularly right now, we're looking at the governor's race and the Senate race.
Yeah, 80% of the vote is in here. Now, that has tightened up a bit there with Tony Evers at 50% and Tim Michaels with 49%. So that's tightened up there with 80% of the vote in. We will continue to watch that, of course.
We have team coverage tonight from Madison to Milwaukee. But let's start with NBC 15's Michelle Beck live in Milwaukee with the incumbent Governor Tony Evers.
She's with the Michaels campaign. Yep.
Tim Michaels. Michelle?
Yeah, John and Maria, you just mentioned the gubernatorial race tightening up, and that might explain just why just 1 minute ago the crowd cheered for the second time here in this room. Now, there are some mixed opinions about where the supporters' confidence sits at this moment. One supporter told me that nothing's impossible, while another person was telling me that she's thinking about all the hours that she put in canvassing for not only Tim Michaels, but also Ron Johnson. And this partnership is also interesting because yet another supporter, he told me it's of note that Johnson is in the lead while Michaels is not. And so, of course, nothing has been called yet, but he is noticing that difference. He's questioning why voters would have chosen Johnson but not Michaels. And so there's some discrepancies there that he is pointing to at this moment. But, as always now, 3 hours into the doors opening to the public here at the Tim Michaels camp in Milwaukee, people are still hovering around those TV screens looking at those numbers come in. And people, I do have to mention people, I have seen them, go home, head home for the night, but no word at this moment from the campaign about when Tim Michaels is expected to show up. We're live in Milwaukee. I'm Michelle Beck.
All right, we see Elizabeth Wattis getting into position there at the Orpheum Theater. That's where Governor Evers is holding his campaign party. Let's go to Elizabeth to get a feeling for the atmosphere and the mood there in that room.
Yeah, John, I'm here at Governor Tony Evers' campaign here in downtown Madison, and the energy, people are dancing, people are singing, watching these votes come in. It is electric in here at the Evers campaign. People feeling really confident. Now, I just talked with Evers' campaign manager, and he tells me that the governor is not on his way to the Orpheum Theater just yet, but he would give the media a 5-minute heads up if he does take that stage anytime soon. So I will be here live in Madison bringing you the latest, but for now, reporting live with Elizabeth Wattis, back to you.
Elizabeth, Michelle, thank you so much. Now, for the time being, we are going to stop our stream.
That's right. You know, NBC News Director of Elections, John Lipinski, told me this state is going to make him an insomniac. Wisconsin will make him an insomniac, and it's starting to look like that. But we'll come back. We have important updates to share with you. In fact, we'll be back at 11:26. We'll see you then.